this is going to be an interesting stream. We're going to talk about Rabbi, actually, and we're going to talk a little bit about how morality and marriage and even theology and the meaning of life even are relevant to a fundamental theory of existence. I don't even know if it's right to say a fundamental scientific theory, because what is science is there's two different definitions that we could use, and it just depends on your definition. But most people would use like the search for truth, and if that's the case, then a collective narrative of the search for truth, on the search for truth, or the collective search for truth, a collective narrative on the collective search for truth, maybe. But if that's the case, then we need then you can call these I guess a fundamental theory a scientific theory. But is philosophy science? That's really the question. And I would say that it is part of science. If a lot of this is a matter of definitions, but the point is that a fundamental metaphysics theory or a fundamental theory of existence that is a philosophical theory is essential to the scientific pursuit. It is the context of the scientific pursuit. It's also the context of all pursuits, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. It is the context of our social pursuits, our personal pursuits, our scientific pursuits, our economic pursuits. You could say your spiritual pursuits. Any pursuit is contextualized within a fundamental theory ultimately, because everything is contextualized within a fundamental theory. So this is something that I talked about in my Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide video, which is linked below. That was my entry into the Pace 1 competition that Kurt Munkel put on. And I said that one of the reasons why nobody really wants a theory of everything, like a true theory of everything, or fundamental theory is a much better term, is because it steps on a lot of toes, and it doesn't restrict itself to abstract mathematics. It doesn't restrict itself to experiments in a lab. It doesn't even restrict itself just to engineering, technological engineering. It doesn't restrict itself to anything. It concretizes everything. Everything. And it means that all these things that we think of in kind of the cultural sense, of the culture at least that I am, of the West, quote unquote, these social sciences or social ideologies are not as much a matter of choice as we commonly think of them as. That doesn't mean that any one person is right about everything. There is no one person that is alive today that is right about everything. And that includes me. And you can come up with you can actually figure out the fundamental theory of reality and map it out, and you will still not know everything. I can tell you that. This is kind of a tough thing, because what it means is that there is a right answer, and we have to acknowledge that there is a right answer, but we also have to admit that we might not have the right answer. And that's a tough space to navigate. But it is the truth. And everybody really feels this, even though when we are asked about it publicly, we'll say, oh, well, that's just a matter of, that's your opinion. And we talk about things like theology as if it is just a story of kind of like a fantasy or a, what's the term for it? A fictional story that we decide to subscribe to. It's like, are you a Star Trek guy or a Star Wars guy? Are you a Christian, or are you Jewish, or are you Muslim or are you Buddhist? And it's what we have to realize is that, and I'm not going to make any claims about any specific religions as being the truth. I think actually all major world religions have truth to them and are fulfill a specific purpose, and they fulfill different purposes. So I don't even view them as competition. But people compete, institutions compete, groups of people compete, but I don't believe that theological traditions, what we call religions, compete. And so I'm not here to argue for any specific religion, but I'm talking about theology as in just core ideas about the nature of existence, and if that existence is fundamentally sentient, then we're talking about theology, and that is what sentient singularity theory seems to suggest. I think it is logically inevitable that that is the case, and if that's the case, then we need to talk about fundamental theology in a way. And by the way, this I am not sentient singularity theory does not denounce any religion that is a major world religion. It doesn't take a stance on any of them or specifically or endorse any of them. It's just, but I would say that it does align with any monotheistic tradition. That's what I would say. It doesn't matter which one. Sikhism, Judaism, some people would say Christianity, Islam, any monotheistic tradition, where there is one initial and all-encompassing eternal someone that is creating additional someones within himself. And so this is not something that is separate from the questions in science. It is the context of science, and it's fascinating, actually. If you're a cell, basically a cell inside of a bigger organism, like, how is that not part of the scientific narrative? It's very much, and it's even more critical than that, but that's a kind of an analogy that's pretty close. But of course that would be part of scientific narrative. It would be the context of our physics. It would lead to answers about, or suggest that at least there are answers to moral questions and questions about the meaning of life. And the thing is that our current scientific narrative doesn't suggest that there is a meaning to life. In fact, it suggests that there is no meaning to life. There's no meaning to anything. And when I say meaning, I don't mean the ability to interpret information, and I mean, do you matter? Like, what should you do? Should you do anything? What if there is no meaning to life? There is no right and wrong. There is no cruel and kind. There is not truly. There is no ability for any type of shared value system, because there is no ability to or justification for a value system at all. The only value system that would be that would result is nihilism. But it's not even nihilism. It's like an indescribable lacking, because that there is no such thing fundamentally as a true absence. So you can't even speak about it, because to speak about it is to use a term, and a term exists when you speak it, and you're trying to speak about something that doesn't exist using terms that do, and so it just doesn't work. And but this is very important, and I think that philosophy, and not just philosophy on like a personal level, but cosmological, theological, evolutionary philosophy is the best chance that we have of actually outlining why there is a reason to do anything, why there is meaning at all. And that is the solution to the meaning crisis, is knowing that there is meaning. The reason why there's such a meaning crisis, and people talk about it all the time, at least they used to. I don't know if it's still like the narrative, but you can certainly feel it still. But I mean, I've done some streams on here about like John Vervaeke. It was a couple of years ago, probably at this point, but we'll come back to it. And others who have, really delved into the meaning crisis and kind of trying to diagnose why it is happening. And then trying to come up with solutions. And I actually don't see very much that I think is truly grounding coming from that many people outside of observant Orthodox theological communities. And they just assume things that we just don't outside of those communities. And so they don't even have to, make it some type of intentional narrative to try and make sure that people understand that meaning exists. It's just built into the reason that they are a community in the first place. So it's not even it's not something that they concern themselves with in the way that we do outside of those communities. And I was raised secular. I was self-described atheist my whole life. Well, not my whole life, until I was 24. And so actually, not my whole life. I'm getting old. Oh my gosh, I'm 34, guys. It was 10 years ago. I've been a theist for 10 years. That's crazy. It seems literally like it was 5 years ago. But I think on sentientsingularity.com it says 5 years ago, I had an existential crisis. And that's what sparked giving, this whole project that gave rise to Sentient Singularity Theory unintentionally. And I got to adjust that. It was almost 10 years ago. But this is not something to be afraid of, but I understand why people are. And it is because, like I said, it steps on people's toes. We all like certain things, and we have certain habits and beliefs and goals that might not be good. And also we have some that might be very good. But if we recognize that there is a fundamental theory, and especially one that is theistic in nature, that holds sentience as the primary attribute or nature of existence, then what happens is that it means that there really is a right and wrong. And that is something that people don't want to have be the case. I mean, everybody feels like it is the case, but when we start to intellectualize it and we talk about it in the halls of academia, then we don't speak about it like that, even though we actually can't avoid it. That's why there's such an obsession with all these different little bits of morality that they take as a piecemeal, but not holistically. So they'll, consent or something like that is, they'll super value on diversity, on consent, on I don't know, diversity and consent. But those are specific things that would arise naturally out of a true moral perspective, potentially, we could see. And you can't just hold them on their own. You can't just hold evolution, the theory of evolution, on its own. You can't just hold the standard model on its own. You need context to everything. And you need a context to you. And so this is what a fundamental theory, especially a theistic fundamental theory, can potentially provide. I would say it does provide. And it doesn't, again, it doesn't step on your religious tradition at all, unless your religious tradition is, I don't know, you're like, you don't believe in God, or you don't believe that sentience is fundamental. God is a loaded term, and I understand that. And everybody, when they hear the word God, they think of something specific, and it's probably not exactly what I'm thinking about. But I think it's important that we have a title for this being, and that is the title that I think makes the most sense, because we all understand that it's not just a thing. Like Michio Kaku, he'll say the God of Spinoza, the God of math, the God of nature. This is not God. God is God only if God is a sentient being. If God is someone, then God is God. If God is the initial, eternal, and all-encompassing someone, that's God. But if it's just something and it's not someone, then it's not God. And so that's the definition that I'm using when I talk about it on the stream ever. And it's a universally understood term, I think, actually. Fundamentally, people will say, which God? No. Like, that's not the God, the existence that it's a sentient someone. That's that God. People who say which God, they're not talking about what I'm talking about. They don't. I would say they don't understand God. You wouldn't ask which God. Any truly devout, not devout, but truly understanding theist, no matter which tradition they're from, will never say which God. The people that say which God are self-described atheists. But we're going to talk about that tonight, because I think it's important that we recognize what atheism is, and we start to really understand why even that description doesn't make sense to anyone, and neither does agnostic. And so we need to get those terms, the correct terms, and it's not that we don't currently use them. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. The stream that I'm going to mention, that I'm going to show clips of, is linked below. It is from the Worldviews YouTube channel, and it is an interview with Rabbi Manis Friedman. Rabbi Manis Friedman, I've actually met Rabbi Manis Friedman once, and he's probably my favorite rabbi that is a public figure. And he's one of my favorite theistic philosophers, I guess you could say. And there's a number of them that I like, but he's definitely my favorite rabbi that's a public figure. And he is a Hasidic Jew, which is a sect of, basically we would just say observant, but most people would say Orthodox, but it's a specific culture within Orthodox, and he's part of the Chabad community, which is the community of Jewish people that I tend to associate with when it comes to rabbis, and identify with, at least. I know every rabbi I've ever met that was a Chabad rabbi, or that I know personally well. I'm not going to say met, but that I know well. The best rabbis that I know are Chabad rabbis. That's what I will say. So I definitely recommend checking out his YouTube channel. He talks about marriage a lot, and we're going to talk about that tonight because it's very relevant to a fundamental theory. And it's not just because I want it to be the case. Why would anybody want that to be the case? Like, I'm not saying you wouldn't want it to be the case, but why would you want it to be the case, either? I'm not pushing an agenda. I hope you, I don't know if that makes any sense, actually. I'm not trying to, I will say this. If what I say makes sense, be honest with yourself about it. if what I'm saying doesn't make sense to you, find a different video. That's what I will say. This is tough to talk about because everybody's got a lot of feelings. And that's what I mean by, a fundamental theory expands into morals and theology, and there's a lot of assumptions and feelings that entails. It expands into economics, nationality, politics. It really gives context to everything. So, but the stream that we're going to reference or show clips of is linked below. It was a great discussion, and the guy who does the interview, what is his name? His name is I posted it in the link below, or in the description. His name is, I just want to give him credit. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's a problem. Devyn. Devyn. Sorry if I botched that. Corvington. But he interviewed Rabbi Manis Friedman, and it is a great discussion, and you should definitely check out more of his videos. Devyn. I don't know how to pronounce your first name. I'm sorry. I think it's Devyn. You should definitely check out his channel. I haven't looked at any other videos that he has posted other than this interview, but this one is one of my favorite interviews of Manis Friedman that I've seen, and I've seen a lot. So definitely check it out. All right, let's go to the chat. Okay. Greetings. Sounds great. Self-discovery. Yeah, I agree. Hope you and Paulina and the baby are doing well. Thank you. We are. My daughter is talking up a storm. I will talk more about it in a stream to come. It's amazing to watch language develop. It is an amazing thing, especially when you're really paying attention to it. And we'll do a whole stream on it once. I'm waiting for her to say her name or to ask me a question that is like understandable to me as a question. I can tell she's trying to ask questions, but I don't know what she's asking. And so when she asks a question that I can understand, I will do a stream, or after she says her name like very well. She hasn't yet done that, but I'm not sure when. After one of those two things, I will do a stream about the development of language. But it's amazing. Please hit the like button. That's a really long intro, but I understand that. Just understand that this is a tough topic. I'm trying to navigate it without pushing people away, but maybe I should not be so worried about it. All right, first clip is I want to talk about I guess the afterlife. Let's dive into him. No.
To have that job.
Right.
How do you get to heaven? If you do good, you go to heaven. If along the way, it's not up to me. I'm very thankful for that. I would hate to have that job. How do you get to heaven? If you do good, you go to heaven. If along the way you do some bad, then you got to make an adjustment before you can get into heaven. And that adjustment can be painful, and we call it hell.
I guess if I was in the religion, my question would be, how do I know that I'm doing good enough to go to heaven?
Well, the commandments are very specific, very clear. If you're not committing adultery and you're not killing anybody and you're honoring your mother and father and you give charity, you're good. You deserve heaven. If along the way you do some bad stuff, then you got to wash it off. You got to clean it up. So on your way to heaven, you clean up. So it's like nobody goes to hell. It's not a destination. You go through hell to get to heaven.
Okay. So, again, I want to say this. It is not as Rabbi Manis Friedman said, he's like, it's not up to me on who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. That's what he said at the beginning of that. I don't know if I clipped it too early, but and he's like, thank God it's not my responsibility, and it's not mine either. It's God's alone, and only He gets to decide who goes to heaven and who doesn't. And we're going to talk about what that really would mean. I think what logically we can deduce about what heaven and hell would be most likely. Again, whether or not you go and what your exact experience is going to be up to God to some degree. So I'm not here to tell you exactly what is going to happen to you or me. I don't know what's going to happen to anyone, but I think we can deduce what heaven is, and what it means to be saved, and super literally saved, and why this is kind of like logically deducible thing. Why certain things about the afterlife, quote unquote, would be logically deducible, and that it would be logically deducible that there is an afterlife, most likely for most people. And this is when I say heaven, I don't mean a place in the clouds with harps and grapes and stuff, whatever fairy tale version of heaven people have. What I mean is a place, or not a place, a state of being in which you still exist and still are aware of yourself and of others, but are no longer embodied. And when we're talking about heaven specifically, that is a place in which you have achieved a peaceful state. Like, you have achieved peace. It's not that heaven is super nice. It's that you have achieved peace for a specific reason. And for specific reasons. Or maybe you have not achieved peace, and that would be hell. Is after you die, you still exist and are self-aware, but you have not achieved a state of peace yet. That's what I believe logically we can deduce heaven and hell would be. Reason for this is, if sentience is fundamental and information is context, then the context of all information that has been gathered in your life, which transcends beyond your life, that context is you. And that means that if God wants to save any of the information that has been generated through your existing, He has to save you, basically, because you're the context, at least most of it. And all that wisdom has to be contextualized within you. And this changes like our whole perspective on morality, if this is the case. But it also seems to just be the case. And the reason why also this seems logically inevitable is because sentience is not an emergent thing. It is a fundamental thing. Sentience is what exists, and it can be embodied. And that body allows specific constraints and degrees of freedom when it comes to maneuvering and changing and impacting others. But what it is, but that doesn't mean it like sentience comes from the physical world. It is embodied in the physical world, but it is fundamental to the physical world. That is a better way of putting it. It's fundamental to the physical world. It is not emergent from the physical world. It is fundamental to the physical world. What this means is that it continues to exist even without the physical world. Or at least a physical body. That's what I'll say. Even without a physical body. And so if that is the case, which it logically seems to be inevitable that is the case, and it also seems to logically be inevitable that you must assume that's the case, even if it's not the case, because the truest thing that you know is that you exist and you're sentient. That's what makes you you. And so this fundamentality of sentience is what means that it transcends birth and death. And it can persist, it cannot. And what it really is, though, is it is coherence. It is a knot that is strings of information that are tied in such a way that they are self-referential. And this knot is not, it does not manifest from physicality. It is fundamental to physicality, I guess. This is very hard to speak about. I've avoided these topics for a couple of years. I used to talk about this stuff a lot more on here, and I've stopped, not purposely avoiding it, but just because, everything has a season. But I think we're going to come back to this a little bit, because this morals and meaning are the most important things that can be learned from a fundamental theory. Not warp transportation or free energy. That's like everybody's obsession is, can we use a fundamental theory to travel faster than the speed of light, quote unquote, or to transcend relativity, or can we use it for, faster than light communication or instantaneous communication, or can we use it for free energy? I'm not saying you can't, but these are not the most important things, because why even do any of those things? Why does that stuff matter? Why does it matter that we have free energy? Well, it allows you to feed a bunch of people and house a bunch of people in much easier and much better conditions and provide for people's needs. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? That's what a fundamental theory is about. Not, can we do warp transportation? It's about why do anything? Why are you here? And if oneness is the fundamental structure of existence, which it is, which is why monotheism is true. It's not, I don't even like the term monotheism. You don't even need to say monotheism. Theism. There's just theism. Theism is intrinsically monotheistic. If it is not, then it's not theism. Theism is, a god is not just something more powerful than you. A bear is more powerful than you. But if we watch like Marvel movies, you see the Avengers, and it's funny because you've got Ultron is like this, kind of organic but artificial, technological sentience, and then you've got that can basically do anything, and then you've got Thor, who is just from basically another planet, but is very strong, but he's called God, and it's like, then you've got Spider-Man, Peter Parker is just like a science experiment gone wrong, who is also just very strong, from a different planet. Now it's like, why is Thor a god? It's because the name Thor comes from the mythology of Greek mythology. That's it. And that is not, God is not, you're not a god just because you're more powerful. That doesn't make you a god. God is the most powerful. That's God. The most powerful being to exist of all beings. That is God. The first being, that is God. The being all other beings are within, that is God. And it's not just, Superman on, or Thor on Asgard or whatever. Like, this is not God. It's very, it's like a terrible use of the term. I hate that they use the term like a god in the Marvel movies, because it's just so confusing on what that is. When people say, which god? Oh, do you mean Loki? Do you mean Thor? Do you mean You know, the Christian God? Do you mean the Muslim God? The Sikh God? This is not the right way to go about it. You're talking about theological traditions and also now, I guess, Marvel characters that were part of mythology, and I guess you could say theological tradition. But there's a reason why that's gone, guys. Like, there's a reason why Greek theology, quote unquote, is no more. And it's because the narrative around it is just, I'm not saying there's no truth in it, but the idea that there's all these gods is incoherent. It's an incoherent use of the term. I'm not even saying those beings don't exist. I'm just saying, like, to call them all gods is, I think, incorrect. But you need a term that is specific, a title that is specific, a name, basically a name title, like it's like saying sir, or ma'am, but for God alone. And that's what God is. God is not a name. In Judaism, like Hasidic traditions, they'll say Hashem is like what they say. They'll call God Hashem. Hashem means the name in Hebrew, and it just means like someone. It's the someone, the name, not a name, the name, the being. Someone has a name. Something does not have a name. You can name something if you want, but really there is no, it's not a name. A name is like it's who you are. I'm Tyler. That's my name. I tell my daughter this, like, Juliana, Juliana, that's your name. And she just laughs at me. But we have a name because we need this. We can't just say human, girl, woman. You know, some people will be like, hey, woman. But which woman? That's the question. You need a name, and that name is basically your title. It's like a specific way of addressing you and calling you. And God is a name, a title that we can use, that it is the English title for, you know, basically the being that is the first being, the all-encompassing being, the most powerful being. And so God, that's what God is, like the term God is. Like when people will say, we believe in God, we don't believe in Allah or something like that. And it's like that's just a ridiculous statement. Like there is a title name for God in every language, probably multiple actually. And so, but that's why it's the name in Hebrew, Hashem. It's not any specific name, because what name is there for God? What is God's name? I don't know. I think that if God had a specific name, then I don't know, he'd probably tell us. But it doesn't. Like the thing is that it wouldn't make sense that he doesn't, because you don't name yourself. Nobody comes up with their own name. Like you can change your name, and sure, like, but you are your first name, your initial name, your naming is done by someone else always, because it's about how they address you. You don't need a name for yourself. If you lived alone on an island, you wouldn't need a name. You would know who you are. And if somebody said, "Who are you?" you'd be like, "I am." Sound familiar? And so it's interesting when in the Bible, when Moses asks God, he's confronted by God, and he says, you know, who am I speaking to, basically? Like, who should I tell people that I spoke to? And God says, tell them I am that I am. I am the I am. Like, the I am. And that's exactly how you would refer to yourself if you lived alone on an island and nobody ever gave you a name. Like, you were born and just thrown onto an island, castaway style, and you lived there alone. And you never interacted with anybody else. You wouldn't need a name for yourself. You wouldn't even try to come up with a name. You wouldn't be like, I'm going to call myself Fred or Wilson. Wilson sounds good. Like, you would be like, I am. You know, that's what you would know. You would feel that. And if you could communicate it all with anybody, you know, eventually, that's what you would say you were. You are, I am I. I am me. That's what, when you say I am me, that's like saying I am the I am. I am that I am. Is the same as saying I am me. But like, you know, capital M me. But we can't say, only God could say me, but capital M me, because it's a first person. You're referring to yourself in the first person. But if that makes any sense, I know it's a side tangent, but this stuff is fascinating because this is why like language is so critical about getting this stuff right. And understanding even the name of God. It's like God's name is what is, if you accurately conceptualize who God is, and whatever name you call him, that's his name. He has many names. Because it's about us referring to him. It's not about him referring to himself. You don't need a name to refer to yourself. So that's why Hashem, the name. Fascinating. But I hope you find it interesting. I do. But this I mean, we went on way side tangent, but this is just another addition to the context of what they're talking about. Is they're going to talk about who is God here, and it's basically, you know, exactly what we just went over, but we'll look at it. Defining.
I love you. I don't love you. Anyway, here's the thing. The definition of God is the original being from which all else derives. Now, who doesn't believe that? The theory of evolution says it all began with subatomic particles. Well, then subatomic particles is God. So everybody believes in God. They just don't like the God of the Bible. Whatever was from which all else derives is God. God is the original being. If there's no original being, then there's nothing more to the story. So the choice is this. Either the original being from which all else derives has no idea what happened, or the original being from which all else derives knows exactly what he's doing.
Okay. So, a couple things. I wouldn't want to say God is subatomic particles. Everybody believes in God. You know, it's just like that. I don't agree with that. I think that's what Michio Kaku does. That's, you know, that it's like, oh, I believe God is math, and I believe in math. So, you know, that's not God. There's no point in saying I believe in God then, just because you believe in subatomic particles. That doesn't mean then there's no point in using the term God. So that's why that's incorrect. But I understand what he's getting at. But this is, again, language important. But so if we're going to use the term God, then that means that it has to refer to something specific. And then he gets into actually like the core issue when he says, okay, everybody believes there is an initial being. The question is, does that being understand what they're doing? Have an understanding of anything? Or does that being have no understanding of anything? Does that being know something or know nothing? And here's the thing. Again, we can get very specific with the language here. In sentient singularity theory, there are beings and things. Beings are someone. A being is someone. It is sentient. It has will. A thing does not. Your body is a thing. Your being is your sentience, your you-ness, your I, your I am is not a thing. It's someone. Okay? And so we don't even need to say an initial being and then clarify, does that being know something or does that being not know something? No. If it's a being, then it knows something. It knows that it has will. Like, it is someone. It knows that it knows. It knows. They know. He knows. We'll say he because it's anything above you in a hierarchy is masculine linguistically. But so even though God is not, a male, like biological male, you'd still say he. But it's a someone. That's the point. And when he says, does this God know something or not know anything? If it doesn't know anything, it's not God. Does this comb know anything? Does this pen know anything? No, it's not someone. But do you know something? Do you know anything? Do you know yourself? Like this, you can't know anything if you aren't someone. And if you are someone, then you intrinsically know you. And so you know something. You know someone, really. But that's the point. And so this is all these things, like we have to add all these clarifiers because we don't have these terms properly defined at least in a universal way. If something is a being, it is a someone. It's not just a something. And so that's why in sentient singularity theory, there's beings and things are perceived by beings, but they are not, and they emerge from the perceptions of beings, but they are not. Beings do not emerge from things. That's the materialistic traditional current scientific establishment belief, is that beings come from things, but it's the opposite. There is no evidence, by the way, that beings come from things. I understand that people will say that that's not the case. They'll be like, well, rocks were here before people. No, you're misdefining. You haven't defined all the beings. So there's beings beyond cells. We just stopped defining beings at cells. And that does not make any sense. And so when you contextualize it within the context of what you know, the truest thing that you know, then it doesn't make any sense. If you just contextualize it within what you learned in your textbook at school, then yeah, sure. And the limited language and false, incorrect linguistic framework that we've been that we were born into, basically, which is like, what is the definition of life? It's like, well, let's look at like a cell and see what it does. No. Look at yourself. Are you alive? Okay. What does that mean then? What does it mean to be alive? That's how you do it. You don't go, I'm looking at a cell. It seems to be eating and pooping, and it has a metabolism, and it's reacting to light. So it's reacting to stimuli. So all these things must be the attributes of life. No. Are you alive? Yes. Do you know? Yes. Okay. Why are you alive? So much simpler and so much more fundamentally, unavoidably true, confirmably true, unfalsifiably true. And so this is where he's right about what he's talking about with God. Is God someone? Does God know anything? Does he have a goal? This is what defines God. It's not just subatomic particles. It's existence, the totality of existence, the singularity of existence that is a sentient being in and of itself. Like, that's God. I keep harping on it, but I just want people, if they're joining, to understand, what I mean when I say that term, because it's the context of everything else we're going to talk about. So let's go to the next clip. We're going to have to do, by the way, a much more coherent stream on this. I've been thinking about this interview all weekend, and I listened to it over the weekend. I was thinking about it all weekend and all week, actually. Wow, it's Thursday. Because I've been trying to figure out exactly how to speak about these things, and this is my practice sometimes on here. If you subscribe to this channel, you know that. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, then you should. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Helps fuel the algorithm. But so, if there's a God, which means if existence is sentient, and existence is singular, meaning like there's only one existence, which by definition that is the case. Existence includes all that exists, so it is all encompassing, meaning there's only one. That means that its nature is oneness. And that is the nature of sentience. That's why we say, I'm someone. We don't say I'm some two. Oh, he's some two. He's some two. Like, that doesn't make sense. I mean, without getting into you're an assembly of cells. Your body is an assembly of cells. You are not an assembly of cells. Your body is an assembly of cells. Your body is an assembly of someones, of many someones, but you are single someone. There's no way to be a sentient being, to be a being, to be alive, quote unquote, to be aware and not be someone. It's built into the words we use. This singularity, the singular nature of sentience is that it's singular, that is in its structure always. And that's why it is built into the terms that we use, the terminology that we use to refer to it. I'm someone. Even when we say I, like this is, it's one letter, guys, and it's the letter that looks like one. You think that's a coincidence, like a meaningless coincidence? Absolutely not. And it's like you would just not have a term that was like that. I don't even know if first person is the right way to put it. Because you have me, which is me is two words, but I is one. So hold on. I versus me. I'm trying to figure out a way to describe this. Let's see what the internet says. Compound. I is a subject pronoun, meaning it performs the action of the verb. Example, I. Okay. Me is an object pronoun, meaning it receives the action. This is what I was trying to state, is that it's me is relational. That's what I was going to say. A ball hit me. This is for you and me. You and me are relational terms. They're not super subjective like I. Fascinating. I went to the store. You don't say me went to the store. It's like you're describing me is you're referring to yourself in the first person, but you're describing a context that is third person. The ball hit me. You and me went to the store. That's such a good way to put it. It's first person, but it's it's you are describing yourself in the first person, but the context is a third person. It's like you're picturing the scenario that you're in. You and me went to the store. You don't say I went to the store, which is like you're thinking about you from the perspective of you going to the store. You're not thinking about like a bird's eye view of me and you going to the store, which is what you do when I say me and you went to the store yesterday. You'd be like you wouldn't think about yourself walking to the store from perspective of your own eyes. You would think about like you and me walking together next to each other to the store. It's like first person in a game when you are playing like a, I don't know, any kind of first person shooter game or something on video games. You can make it so that you just see your hands and it's like you're just looking forward. You see your hands and whatever's in your hands, a rifle or whatever. And then you can also make it so that you're looking at yourself from above and it's like, I don't know, the Grand Theft Auto like kind of perspective. You're kind of controlling a body from above. That's me. Whereas you're just seeing your hands. If that makes any sense. But it's important. Like this language is amazing. It really, really is amazing. I have come around to just being so much more appreciative and just fascinated by language. It is a math equation, but it's a more fundamental math equation than math, than just a typical algebra. I mean, algebra couldn't even exist without, a spoken language and a written language of a written and spoken language, I guess. I don't know. Right. Yeah, a written language, you just say a written language. But that's what it's so funny because in science, in the scientific narrative today, we'd say mathematics is fundamental and to anything else. It's like you can't even have algebra or the language that you use to write equations without a relational subject-focused language already existing. That is a huge clue to the nature of our world, by the way. It's not just irrelevant. Fascinating. Me versus I.
There's more people that come to you for those existential crises. They come to you more now than ever versus in the past. You think it's kind of
Yes, and younger people.
Younger people.
And sometimes their problem with their marriage is really the existential problem. They're just blaming it on each other. So then you have to switch hats. No. You don't need marriage counseling. You need to figure out why you exist at all. And that will help a lot.
So you're saying they struggle with meaning and that's leaked into their marriages?
Meaning in their own existence. So they certainly can't justify coexisting. I'm having a hard time with my existence. I have to worry about yours too.
Yeah. And I imagine you yourself as married.
Oh yeah.
How long have you been married for?
57 years.
Whoa. Okay, I'd love to hear you say some tidbits on marital advice.
The only
Okay, so we're going to jump around a bit because he justifies, he's getting, there's just an order that this will make sense in, but I think that if we've talked about like God and what is God, who is God, and that remember the like even if you don't think that that's what I've said is true, like but you're still here, I appreciate you. Just assume for the sake of context, the rest. Assume what I've said about God for the sake of the context of the rest of what we're going to talk about here. And so he starts talking about like meaning and how young people are having this existential crisis. And I think that is literally because of our science, our scientific education. I really do. I think that our scientific narrative in academia is responsible for the meaning crisis. It's not social media. People are like, oh, so with social media, and it's funny because Rabbi Friedman says on here, he's like, he says marriage is the only antidote to not being alone, basically. And he says people will have, a bunch of people online, but not be married. It's like, that's such a lonely thing when so many people know who you are, but you feel like you don't know any of them, basically, is what he's saying. It's like all these people feel like they know you, but they really don't. They can't. They don't know you. They feel like they know you, and I know that. I mean, everybody knows that. You listen to the same people. There's certain people that you follow online, and you listen to their content a lot. Eventually, if it's long form content, you will feel like you know them. And the thing is, maybe you do a little bit, but they don't know you. That's the difference. Which means that, that's not a relationship. And so it's not going to make anybody feel meaning at all, because relationships are what make us feel meaning. And we'll get into that a bit. But this is, he's going to say something about like just why it's so important to answer the question, which is what most people are trying to ask when they say, what is the meaning of life? What they really mean is, why am I here and what should I do? Why do I exist? And what should I do? And really, that's the same question. Is you do exist, and given that you exist, what should you do? And you can also think about it as, why do I exist? Well, why were you made to exist? What's the point of you being created? But if nobody created you and you're just an accident of the mud, which doesn't make any sense with physics, there's no causality in that. The complexity and order does not manifest accidentally, absent intentional action, anywhere that we look, anywhere in the world. Those are the questions that we're trying to ask. When we ask, what's the meaning of life? People that ask that are not, they don't have the context that would allow them to answer it. If you're asking, what is the meaning of life? You're not a theist. You're not a theist. You don't believe that you were made intentionally. If you believe that, then you're much less likely to ask that question of what is the meaning of life. You would say, what is right and wrong? That's what you would ask. But you wouldn't say, what is the meaning of life? You ask, what is the meaning of life, if you don't believe that there was any intentionality behind your existence. And if that's the case, there is no meaning of life. Why would you even ask? It doesn't make any sense to ask. But we feel like there should be. We want there to be, because otherwise, what's the point of putting up with it all? And it's like, it's not even like, what's the point of putting up with life? It's like, what is even the point of ending life? There's no point to anything. It just all falls apart, and it's impossible to navigate or even conceptualize anything about the world, because all of a sudden it's like, well, why should I do that? Why should I do anything? Why should I do nothing? Why? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And you end up with just like hedonism, because it's the easiest default. Is we're here, and so might as well, and for no reason that's like beyond ourselves. And if there's no reason beyond ourselves that we're here, and we can come up with our own reason for being here, then it's like, enjoy yourself as best you can. That's what how it hedonism manifests, and hedonism is the culture, but that's not meaningful, obviously, because people are having existential crises left and right, and they feel like they have no meaning to their life. They have no awareness of what they should do, and you need a context that would push you in this, or that would frame you in such a way that would allow you to see what you should do and why you're here. And you wouldn't even ask most of the time any of these questions. They would just be intrinsically understandable, or the answers that most people are seeking when they ask them are intrinsically just understood by you if you have the right perspective. So, but when people say, what is the meaning of life? First of all, like I said, they are assuming there is no meaning already, and they're asking the question, which still, because their academic abstraction of why they're here and their cosmology is basically says that there is no intentionality behind their existence, which means there's no meaning to their existence. But their personal firsthand experience is that there is meaning. When you do certain things, you feel fulfilled, and when you don't do certain things, you feel empty, and it's not a good feeling to feel worthless and meaningless and empty. It's a terrible feeling. Why would it be a terrible feeling if there was no actual meaning? And you can try and intellectualize it all you want within this false context that we've been born into in the secular world, but ultimately you still have to navigate your own personal experience. So it's definitely not a good model. It doesn't allow you to navigate yourself because you have feelings. Why do you have feelings if life is meaningless? if there's no meaning behind it? And why are people depressed when they have all the money and toys in the world? That's a good question. But it's also a question that only is asked by people who are secular, or not secular, people who are not theists. They're anti-theists, not an atheist, an anti-theist. And they'll call themselves an atheist. Sometimes they'll call themselves an agnostic if they're being a coward. But atheist and agnostic do not make any sense. These are terms that are false. They are not properly contextualized, and they don't, which means they cannot allow us to make sense of what is going on. And so we're going to look at a clip here that he talks about this basically. And if you follow this channel, then you know some of the things that I've said, which we'll touch on in a minute. But let's see what he has to say about this, because again, it's just so important. I know I'm jumping around, but this is my sounding board sometimes, you guys. This was a stream that I've been thinking about a lot, so I wanted to talk about it, but it's not one that I have talked about on these topics are not topics that I talk about on here very often as in depth as I'm trying to do in this one, at least not for a while, and so I'm rusty. But here you go. Atheism. This is his take on atheism. It's brilliant.
Generally, they don't come to me for for advice. But every now and then, yeah, people who are not really atheists, but they think they are.
Really? You come across that a lot?
Oh, yeah. This guy who says to me, "Oh, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe that he exists. I don't believe he ever was. I said, "Excuse me, but what's God?" He says, "I don't know." I said, "So what don't you believe?"
Well, I'd be curious to hear what you define God as.
Well, one thing is for sure. If you don't know what God is, then you can't say you don't believe it. Most people, when they say I'm an atheist, they mean I don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know. So if you don't know, of course you don't believe. So if you don't believe, you think you're an atheist. No, that doesn't work that way. To be an atheist, you have to study a lot and then say, no, I don't believe it. But if you've never studied, you can't even be an atheist. You just don't know enough.
Brilliant. So I remember when I was 13, I was just about to have my bar mitzvah, and I went to my rabbi. I went to a Reform synagogue, which means basically secular, except on, high holidays. It's like when, you're not religious at all, except when you go to church on just Christmas Eve, and that's it. That's the kind of Jewish culture that I grew up in. And my rabbi sat down with me, and he was like, tell me what you think about God. And I was like, I don't believe in God. And he was like, why not? And I was like, well, it says in the Bible that God created the world in 7 days, and I know that there are fossils that are way older than 5,000 years or whatever. How long it people when they count like the years of the biblical years, I guess, then you basically come to, I don't know, it's like 5,000 something right now. How many years since creation? Bible. It says roughly, according to many biblical interpretations, roughly 6,000 years have passed since creation, a number derived by adding up the genealogies in the Bible, particularly in the book of Genesis. However, the Bible itself does not state a specific number of years, and not all Christians or Jews agree on this young earth interpretation, with some believing that the creation occurred much earlier. What's interesting is that the Bible Scripture takes a different perspective on what is creation. It doesn't start at the Big Bang. It starts at human civilization. That's where it starts. And so how long ago was our current, at least, it's a tech tree of our human civilization? Maybe, I don't know, maybe like 6,000 years, something like that. It's not 13.8 billion years. I don't understand how they even get that number, to be honest, when they say the universe is 13.8 billion years old. Like, a year is a relative thing, time is a relative, but yet it's kind of being treated as objective, in this weird way that doesn't make any sense. And so, but the point is that I said, there are fossils that are way older than 6,000 years to my rabbi. And I was like, and I know that they are older than 6,000 years, so I don't believe in God. And he was like, well, what if one day for God is not the same as one day for us? Because God created the world in 6 days, and then it's been 6,000 years since that happened, and I, according to the Bible, and I just thought that was a cop-out and ridiculous. I was like, okay, well, what if a day for God is different than us? That's a cop-out. And I just never thought about it again for many, many years of my life. And then I had a theophany after I graduated college, thinking about the nature of sentience, because I was curious about AI and AGI. And it made me I eventually deduced that that existence itself is a singular sentience, and had a theophany. It changed my whole perspective on everything, and in an instant, like literally an instant, not over the course of a few weeks, an instant. Of course it would, though. It's like, imagine if you found out, a minute ago that you were intentionally created, and so was everyone else, by someone with a goal. would that change everything that you will think about, how you think about everything? It wouldn't. It's not that it erases everything that you know or that you've experienced. It's that it recontextualizes everything. It's because it's such a fundamental, it's the fundamental context. It's a change in your fundamental context. And so it just instantly changes how you view everything. It doesn't mean you don't have to think about everything all over again. It just means every time you come back to a topic, it's going to be like totally different than, you're going to view it totally differently than you did prior to having that. But the point is if you believe that existence is sentient, you are a theist. If you believe that existence is inanimate and that somehow animated sentient beings manifest unintentionally, accidentally, it's not even accidentally, unintentionally, randomly, whatever. None of these words make very perfect sense. There is no word that makes perfect sense because we're talking about nonsense. But if you believe that sentience emerges from somehow non-sentience, from inanimate matter, then you are an anti-theist, not an atheist. And I called myself an atheist. And the reason why you're not an atheist is because to be a theist is to believe that existence is a singular sentient being. You interact with existence every day, all the time. Do you think that it cares about you or cares about anything, that it is self-aware, that it has feelings? If you do, then you are a theist. If you don't, then you are an anti-theist, not an atheist, because atheist means like absent. Atheist definition: a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. There's so much wrong with like this definition that comes up. For one, God, by definition, is the one initial, all-encompassing, most powerful, first, all-wise being, like that is someone, not something, and therefore cannot be gods. If you believe if there's multiple gods, then God, the definition of God, automatically becomes that which is more powerful than you, that which lives longer than you, that which is stronger than you, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's something that is beyond you. Guess what? A bear is beyond you, okay? Physically, at least. In the physical sense, a bear is a god, okay? Thor and a bear are pretty similar physically, but maybe not intellectually would the bear be God, more powerful than you, but physically, yes, absolutely. And so that's not, is a bear God? No, it's not. That's ridiculous. So that's why there cannot be multiple gods. There literally cannot be multiple gods. And the only definition that you could, some people would try and say, is that they are an eternal being. Like they don't die, I guess, ever. But you don't die. So necessarily, most of us will not. Most of us will persist. I will say, will die physically, but not your soul will, and your sentience and your self-awareness and your being. For most of us, will persist. So that's why that definition doesn't make sense either. But that would mean like a vampire is gone. Okay. I don't think Edward Cullen is gone. But that's why God won. When it says here, atheist, though, is a person who disbelieves or lacks a belief. These are two different definitions. Lacking a belief about something is to not have an opinion. To disbelieve in something is to have an opinion, and to be against it. To be against, your opinion is against that thing, and so this is why this definition makes no sense. And so if I look up, this word makes no sense, atheist. But if I look up agnostic definition, person who believes that nothing is known or can be known of the existence or nature of God, or of anything beyond material phenomenon. A person who claims neither faith nor disbelief in God. In other words, cowards. Social cowards. People who don't want to risk offending the people that they're around. That's what an agnostic is. And I mean, that is literally when somebody says, I'm an agnostic. No, you are being cowardly. I'm not going to say you are a coward, but you are being cowardly. That's what you're saying. You just don't realize it. That's why it says here, a person who believes that nothing is known or can be known. People have all kinds of thoughts and have always about the fundamental nature of existence. And you can't say, I believe nothing is known about it. Okay, then don't be an academic. Don't do anything, because how do you know anything if that's the case? And then when it says nothing can be known, it's like, then if nothing can be known about the existence or nature of God or anything beyond material phenomena, then nothing can be known about anything other than, just your personal experience. But even then, like that, your personal experience is beyond physicality. So people say, a person who claims neither faith nor disbelief in God, or that nothing can be known or is known about the nature of God or anything beyond material phenomena. What about you? How do you, the truest thing that you know is you. That's beyond material phenomena. Like, this is why both these definitions are nonsense. Atheist. It's a term that should not exist. It describes a perspective or a person that does not actually exist. And same thing goes with agnostic. It's impossible. But an anti-theist, that exists. And most people that call themselves atheists are actually anti-theists. And again, though, when you're an anti-theist, the only way to truly be an actual anti-theist is to believe that sentience is not fundamental and that it is emergent. That's it. That's an anti-theist. It's not someone who disbelieves in the Bible or something like that. It has nothing to do with the Bible. It has to do with, do you believe that existence is a singular sentient being? That's it. And if you don't, and that is, another way of putting this is that sentience is fundamental. If you believe that, then you are a theist. It has nothing to do with the Bible. And but when Manus Friedman, it's funny when he says it's very hard to be an atheist. It's actually impossible to be. My point is it's impossible to be an atheist because everybody interacts with existence all the time. And so you can't claim to be agnostic about it. You can't or when I say agnostic, I mean I just mean specifically having no opinion. You can't claim to have no opinion on the nature of existence. You exist in existence and interact with existence every day. You can't have no opinion on it. You can have no opinion on Bigfoot. You can be like, I haven't looked. If somebody says, do you believe in Bigfoot? You can be like, I haven't looked into it. I don't know. But if somebody says, do you believe that existence is a sentient being, that we are inside of a sentient being or not? You will have an answer to that question. You cannot claim, I don't know. So when people say, do you believe in God? Question is, like, are they accurately conceptualizing what that question even means? And I was not when I answered my rabbi at 13. I had a very specific belief that I thought defined God, and it wasn't even a very informed opinion or a very informed belief. It's funny because in the Bible, like, when it says God created the world in 6 days, it actually, the Hebrew says God created the world in 6 yom, which means period. In a more direct translation, periods could be a day, but it could also be a different period. It doesn't even necessarily mean a temporal period. It could mean a period that is based on the nature of the world, at the time. So, and I didn't know that. and what's fascinating and funny is I went to my Chabad rabbi, one of my rabbis who's Chabad, who are a member of Chabad, just like Rabbi Manis Friedman is, after college and after having my theophany. And I was like, I had such a misunderstanding of what God even was. And I didn't know, like, that there was so much more to this, and it was so much more sophisticated, philosophically sophisticated than I, or philosophically just logical than I had been, made to believe as a kid. And he was like, this is what he said to me. He said, most people who are atheists stopped their theological education as a kid. And so their conceptualization of theism is childish. And when you are not a child anymore, and your entire theistic perspective is still that which is the perspective of a child, because you never learned any more, then yeah, you're not going to believe it. And you shouldn't believe it, because it's a fairy tale, basically, like, almost at that point. It's a hollow fairy tale. I'm not saying it's completely fairy tale. I'm just meaning, like, it's not the adult. It's what you tell a kid, when you don't want to actually explain something. That's how most people view God. And who are atheists, they don't know enough to even call themselves an atheist. And I would say this: you can't even be an atheist, because it doesn't make any logical sense. But I will say you're really an anti-theist, and you probably, almost certainly, do not know enough about even the definition of God to accurately call yourself an anti-theist. Like, your definition of God is probably a definition that, if that's how I defined God, I probably wouldn't believe in God either. And so this is just an important thing to recognize, is like your own place in this. You don't know nearly, if you grew up in a secular house, to think that you have any understanding of theology is insane. It's legitimately insane. And I mean that it's not, like, definitionally, it is nonsensical. Like, it doesn't make any sense to think that you understand that. But the thing is you never know what you don't know. You always think that you know, till you realize that you don't know about all kinds of things. But it's very hard to recognize what you have limited understanding of, if you've never been exposed to, like, what it would mean to have a deep understanding. Like, I had never met an Orthodox Jew until I went to college. And like, the most like Jewish people that I knew, observant and serious, like, people, when it comes Jews that I knew, that when it came to, like, their engagement with Judaism growing up, was, do you eat cheeseburgers and pork or not? That was it. That doesn't matter. Like, we all had the same worldview. And it was an anti-theistic worldview. But so when Rabbi Manis Friedman says, you have, in order to be an atheist, you really have to study a lot, and then you have to disbelieve. That's, like, I agree with the general, what he's trying to say, but I would say, in order to be an anti-theist, you really have to study a lot, and then you have to, still know what the truest thing that you know is, which is, I am. And then you still have to believe that, your existence is, to yourself, is even an illusion, and that sentience emerges from inanimate matter somehow. Like, that is what it would mean to be an anti-theist. Like, and I don't think that's possible. I don't think that it's possible to have a coherent perspective on what it means for sentience to be fundamental and be an anti-theist. But the next question is, does God, if God exists and existence is sentient, does God care about what we do? And so people will say there's deism and theism. And deism means like, I believe in that, we'll just say existence is sentient, but it really means like a being beyond us, which, what does that mean? But I believe in a higher power, like electricity. Doesn't make sense. But God, sentient being that is existence itself. If you're a deist, you believe that existence is a singular sentient being that we are within, and it has, self-awareness and goals, but it's not concerned with us. And to be a theist, usually people assume that God is concerned with us. And I would say that deism doesn't make any sense either, because if oneness is the nature of existence itself, by definition. Existence is all that exists. There's only one of them. And sentience by its nature is someone. That means that to manifest multiplicity is against the nature of existence. It's against the default state, the intrinsic state, the initial inevitable state. It takes action to create multiplicity of sentience, is what I'm getting at. It's basically like swimming upstream. You cannot float upstream. You have to swim upstream. For multiplicity to exist, meaning you and me to exist within sentient existence, it implies that the partition of sentience that I am, that you are, was an intentional choice by God. Even every mosquito was an intentional choice by God. Every little mosquito soul, which, I don't understand why he made them, but he's wiser than me. I just have to know that. But I hate him. Every fire ant, every cell was an intentional partition of God's oneness of being. Every single one. Because if he didn't try to do it, it would not happen. That basically logic is basically a logical proof that God definitely cares about what we're doing. Because if he didn't, we wouldn't be here. Like you are the evidence that God cares about you. Because if he didn't, you wouldn't exist. That's an enormous shift in, and again, it just shows like when you have the correct perspective, the correct metaphysical or logical, coherent metaphysical framework, you don't even have to ask, am I a deist or a theist? Or does God care about us? It's like we wouldn't exist if God didn't care about us. Enough to literally partition part of his being off and intentionally create us every single time. It was a choice. There's no, and it took will and an action and will and a choice by God to partition every single someone that exists within him, within existence. That's profound. And it seems logically inevitable. I'm gonna go to the chat in a minute. I know I've just been rambling. It's very late, and I've been thinking about this stream and how to talk about it all week. But I feel like I failed a bit tonight. But it's not a failure. It's practice for next week. Well, I heard a rabbi today talk about the animal soul and the godly soul, and he said we are schizophrenic by design. It's part of the experience God wants us to experience. Struggle between the two souls. Well, that's just what the rabbi said, and they said some crazy stuff, so I've also heard some pretty solid wisdom from them. I actually know exactly what they're talking about. That philosophy is from Tanya, and it's Hasidic Jewish philosophy. Chabad rabbis study it a lot. I studied it. Basically, they say that a human being has two souls. Essentially, it's an animal soul and a godly soul. I don't know if I would use the word soul. I don't know if that's the best translation, because your soul is your you-ness, and there are two parts, two two constraints and you have a constraint, and these are constraints. Your constraints and degrees of freedom of you. It's not two yous, two someones within you. It's more like it's the constraints and degrees of freedom that you metaphysically maneuver or mentally maneuver, and so or willfully maneuver, almost even more fundamentally. And so you have which means you have your instincts. Your animal soul is your instincts. It's your kind of not unconscious, but instinctual, automatic, pre-programmed desires and tastes and feelings. And then you have your godly soul. Maybe not feelings, but pre-programmed desires and tastes. And then you have your godly soul. Your godly soul is just your ability to see what is true, to kind of to use logic, essentially. That's really what it means. And it's the part of you that's focused on finding what is true. And then you have your animal soul, which is focused on achieving certain goals and that are physical. Like it's focused on the physical versus focused on kind of the spiritual or the metaphysical. I don't even want to say spiritual because it just has so many I guess just people think all kinds of things when they hear the term spiritual or supernatural or God. And so I'm trying to limit which many of these terms I use, but you could say mental. It's like the part of you that is concerned with the mental, part of you that is concerned with the truth. It's the part of you that is concerned with logic. It's the part of you that is concerned with that which exists beyond your body. But the animal soul is concerned with your the experience of being in your body, your embodied experience. And that's, I don't agree with the translation of you have animal soul and godly soul. I don't think it makes sense because you have a soul. You don't have two souls. An animal soul is not a soul, almost in the way that it's just defined within the context of like this that what you're talking about, and because it's like programming, and animals do have a soul, but they're not just pre-programmed, robots, and they have instincts. They have pre-programming. So do you. But the godly soul is concerned with that which is not just motivated by the pre-programming. It's motivated by beyond, like what is truly fundamental and fundamentally true. But yeah, it's the Hebrew terms are something nefesh, godly soul. In Christianity, they call this the like original sin almost, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the godly soul. They just call it the godly soul in Judaism, but it's what Christians call the Holy Spirit. The godly soul refers to the spiritual part of a person that is connected to the divine, particularly in Jewish and Christian thought, representing a source of good inclination, selfless desires, spiritual elevation. In Kabbalah, the nefesh ha-elokit, which is the godly soul, in Hebrew, is seen as the divine emanation within a person, contrasting the nefesh ha-bahamit, the animal soul, and it strives to connect with God. Christian context, it can refer to a positive spiritual connection with God or others, known as the godly soul tie fostering. It's the Holy Spirit. Godly soul, Holy Spirit. It's the peace of God in you. Animal soul can refer to the distinct soul attributed to animals in scholastic tradition, or more broadly to the conceptualization of a spiritual or okay. Animal soul. Yeah. You see that like it's just your constraints and degrees of freedom of your experience is really what it is about. It's not two different souls. You can't have two different souls. You are a soul. People say like, oh, you sold your soul. If you truly like sell your soul, it means you don't have one anymore. Like you just have descended into incoherence to the point where you're basically like being held together physically, but there's no metaphysical soul or someone behind it. And after you perish, that's it. And because there's no fundamental coherence going on. Like the coherence, the informational coherence that's happening is happening in just the physical space because of everything that everyone else sees, not because of what you see. You basically denied yourself. When you sell your soul, you sell yourself. You give up yourself. And that's why it's associated with, just basically being willing to do anything for something that is physical only. That's not fundamentally true. Being willing to give anything and everything for that which is not fundamentally true, or that which is not fundamental. He said it was 2 wives. That's fine. So there must be an I who is married with those 2 souls, the loved wife and the hated wife. I don't know what you mean. And that was a bit messed up, the hated wife. Or no. If I've never heard that before. You shouldn't hate your animal soul is not evil. The issue with your animal soul is that we have created a different context. Our animal soul, basically our instincts, that's what that means, our physical instincts, they evolved on a lineage basis in a context that is not the current context that we exist in. That's why people eat so much candy and sugar, is because sugar wasn't, you couldn't just go to the store and get endless candy all day long. When that instinct to crave sugar, or to make sure that you really, consume it when it's available, that evolved when sugar was not often available. And it was a very beneficial source of calories when it was available. But when it's always available, that instinct is still there. And so it's now in a context in which it unchecked can motivate you into bad behaviors. But it's not evil. The context it's just in the wrong context. For animals that are not humans, they still exist in the context where their instincts evolved. We don't. We created technological civilization, and that changed the context. And when people say things like, oh, well, why can't we just go naked? Why is there no civilization, by the way, where people just are naked? There's like hippie communes, and those are like a bunch of retired people. It's not a self-sustaining civilization that is growing. Even if it's self-reliant about their farming or something, like they're not growing, and that tells you something about like there seems to be something about physical modesty and clothing that is required for human like multiplication within a technological civilization. That's fascinating. and it tells you something maybe about morals. And it's like the context is what it makes our animal soul often inconvenient, but it does not. It's not evil. The original sin was leaving the garden. It's not that you are intrinsically sinful. It's that your instincts evolved for a context that you're no longer in, and in this context, your instincts will motivate you to sin, which means like to do something that's harmful. And often, not always, but often, it also motivates you to do that which is good sometimes, but usually not the case if it's left unchecked. And so this is an important thing to realize about yourself. It is a very helpful kind of framework to just how to kind of view yourself, but it's not enough. You have to also understand the context in which you exist, which is we left the garden, like, which means we no longer exist in the world that was made, that wasn't made by us. We exist in the world that we have built, or in the world that we're trying to build ourselves, instead of the world that was constructed by someone else for us. And that changes what is a harmful and what is a helpful action, and what is what your instincts motivate you towards, and things like that. So anyways, Tanya, very fascinating philosophy. I think it is brilliant, actually. It's probably, Tanya is one of the greatest pieces of philosophical work, and it's not known by anybody other than like Hasidic Jews. And that's a shame, because it's way, 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 way better than what is taught in philosophy departments in colleges. Like all the philosophical geniuses, I don't want to say philosophical geniuses, because genius is a moment. It's not a person, but all the people that are kind of the notable philosophers of that are discussed in academia, Leibniz and Newton and just anyone that they discuss. There's countless, and they're almost all theists, and their theological beliefs are almost always ignored and not discussed in any kind of depth in college or in academia, in academic circles. And the reality is that their entire philosophical framework is contextualized within their theism, and it's like we tried to take their framework out without bringing the context of that framework that gave rise to that framework. And so that's also why you can't, which is why it's useless. And it's also why, like Tanya is not mainstream, Tanya philosophy. But that's so, like, their theological traditions like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, these are extraordinarily deep. They are deeper. And I would say that they are deeper than anything discussed within like the secular academic world. Absolutely. It's not even a question. Which is funny, because they're looked down on by the academic, secular academia, but it's so much deeper. They just don't know, though. That's the thing, is like the secular academics and philosophers and such, they don't know the depth of like the philosophy of these theological traditions. It's so incredibly deep and logically rigorous, and it's just that's not known. So we got how long have we been at this? An hour and 45 minutes. Not bad, actually. This rabbi, by the way, Rabbi Manus Friedman, he has 14 kids. 14 children. That's amazing and so incredibly wonderful. Like, I can't even, there's only one blessing that I feel like you can have that's better than that in this world while you're living in this world, and that is having a good marriage. That is more of a blessing than any amount of kids, actually. And I say that as somebody who, I just adore my daughter, like more than I ever thought I could. To the point where, like, my wife and I have to be like, we have to pay attention to ourselves and prioritize each other. Not ourselves, but our marriage. Like, we have to prioritize our marriage, and not just be too focused, not put our daughter before our marriage. And the thing is that if you really want to put your children first, that you should put your marriage first. Marriage is the context for, it is the best, it is the optimal context for children. I'm not saying that people can't, do the best that they can out as a single parent, and I'm not saying you shouldn't appreciate your parents even if you grew up with a single parent household. Definitely should always appreciate your parents. If you're alive and your parents raised you, you should definitely be grateful to them, because they didn't have to do that. They could have left you outside, and they didn't. But and if you're alive, they succeeded. Like, if they raised you, they succeeded. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that everything they did was right. Nobody gets it all right as a parent, and you don't know what you get wrong until after, and sometimes you never figure it out. But like, again, there's no civilization on Earth in which marriage is not the cultural norm, the normative cultural expectation that continues to have a positive birth rate. Never. It does not exist anywhere, and not for any extended period of time. There are cultures where there's polygamy, polygamy is not a lack of commitment. It's more commitment, actually. It's like a man has to be committed to providing for 4 wives now instead of 1. It's not the ideal, but it is still commitment. It's more commitment, actually. It's more responsibility. It's not what anybody should want unless it takes like a special type of person with special amount of will and resources to be able to handle that. 1 wife is enough, I will say, for almost everybody. And I would say for anybody, 1 wife would be enough. It's just the only use of polygamy is that sometimes there aren't enough good men for women to be husbands to women, and that is when that's the point of polygamy. And you'll never see 1 woman with multiple husbands ever in any civilization. It does not exist, and so it's very specific definition of polygamy. It's still marriage, but marriage, there is no civilization that exists where marriage is not the norm at all long term. And it is also true that it's the only context in which overall there is a positive birth rate in the long term. Like, it's a sustainable birth rate. It's also the only sustainable economic model for a civilization. Is marriage is one where marriage is the norm. And there's so much more to it, though, than just that. But that is, I mean, the math of marriage is insane. It's when people are like, oh, how do we be more efficient and green? Have 1 bed for 2 people, 1 fridge for 2 people, 1 house for 2 people, 1 bedroom for 2 people, 1 kitchen for 2 people, 1 living room for 2 people, 1 TV for 2 people. You don't get married, 2 TVs for 2 people, 2 kitchens for 2 people, 2 houses for 2 people. And it is an economically stable and economically generative social technology. It's amazing, but it's also so much more than that. Is probably the greatest personal risk. If you're attracted to the opposite sex, it is your number one social responsibility is to get married. And if you're not attracted to the opposite sex, I would say your number one social responsibility is to find a way to contribute to that system and not oppose that system. Like, you want to be supportive of that culture of marriage. It sustains your world still. Like, it's not, it's the only way for society to have order. But we have the opposite now. Like, marriage is considered a personal choice, not a responsibility. And it's only it like, you should get married if you want to get married. Why would you want to get married? Well, I really, really love this person. Okay, this is nothing to do with marriage. I don't even know what that means. And I've said on here before, and we're going to get to Manis Friedman's clip of this in a second. I would really, I want to have Manis Friedman on eventually. I'm going to reach out and ask if he'd like to come on here, because we agree on a lot. And I really appreciate that he focuses so much on marriage. Because it is the antidote to our, it's the beginning of the antidote to our, I would say this. There's remember those two questions of what is the, when we said, people say, what is the meaning of life? What people really mean is, why am I here? And what should I do? Why you are here is God wanted you to be here. And I think there's multiple reasons why, but at least one is it provides meaning to himself even. Like, he's meaningless if there's no one else but him. He's meaningless. Who wants to be meaningless, alone, and eternal? That sounds boring and depressing. But if you create others, then you are you're the most meaningful being that exists now. You went from being the only being that is truly meaningless, that has truly ever been meaningless, to being the most meaningful being. That's God's experience. God is the only being that has actually been meaningless, not felt meaningless, been meaningless. Also probably felt meaningless, but felt meaningless and been meaningless. We can feel meaningless. We are not. If we were meaningless, we would be here. So we feel meaninglessness when we aren't doing what we need to do, and we don't know what we need to know. We need to know, why are we here? Because God wants you to be here. God meant for you to be here intentionally, chose for you to be here, created you intentionally. And what should you do? If you're attracted to the opposite sex, get married. That's what I will say. It's a responsibility, and it's not just a responsibility. It's to others. It's to yourself too. I mean, you cannot, until you really realize it. Like, it's the breadth of importance of this action is not understood. But here, this is why I will say. Well, let's look at this clip.
Oh yeah.
How long have you been married for?
57 years.
Whoa. Okay. I'd love to hear you say some tidbits on marital advice.
The only antidote to being alone in the world is marriage. Feeling alone in the world is the disease of our generation. We are the loneliest generation ever, even though we have internet. And you can get a bunch of people to like you online, which makes you feel so alone. It's really a dangerous illness, because when you feel alone, your immune system crashes. And then you're vulnerable to every disease and every flu and every cold and everything. So when God said it is not good to be alone, it's not good to be alone. The only antidote is marriage. Because having parents you love is not a solution. You're still alone because you're not.
When he says you're vulnerable to everything, he's not. I'm not saying he doesn't mean actually like the flu. But I think he means more than that. You're vulnerable to outside influences that are destructive. That's what it is. Much more vulnerable.
With them, you're number 3, not number 1. With your children, you're not number 1. The only relationship in which you are number 1 is marriage. You and only you. That's a marriage. It's not parents and it's not children. Now, lately I've been noticing that people who are happily married still feel alone. And that's really scary. Because marriage, at the very least, is meant to take away the loneliness, the aloneness, which is worse than loneliness. Billy Joel has a very good song.
Yeah, notice how he said aloneness, not loneliness. Loneliness is a feeling. You can be not alone and feel lonely, but then there's being alone. And we're never actually alone. God is always there. But as far as other people around us, those are still very important and critical relationships. If they weren't, God wouldn't have made you into a human. You were made into a human. You were embodied in a human body to interact with other humans, other souls in human bodies. That's what I will say. If you were just meant to chill with God and not talk to anybody else, then you wouldn't have been embodied in a human body. But when he says aloneness, it's like God is the only being that has ever truly been alone, completely alone. That's crazy. It's like, why did he create us? Partially, probably, who didn't want to be alone. Who wants to be alone? It's boring. And there's no meaning to your existence. You're not impacting anyone else. And when people say all the time, can God create a rock so heavy you can't lift it? What they're trying to do is create a situation in which try and highlight the limits of God's power. And so I would say that's a stupid statement for so many reasons. It's a nonsensical statement, or question. It's a nonsensical question. It doesn't make any sense. But like, if you understand what a rock is and why what the perception of a rock is and what would cause it, there's no way. It's just, God can't just create a rock so heavy you can't lift it. It doesn't make any sense. But if you understand the context of physics as interactions between sentient beings, nested sentient beings, it just does, the whole thing doesn't make sense. But the point is that the intent is to get at God's limits. So a better question is, can God end his own existence if he wanted to? And I don't think he can. I think that is God's limit, is he cannot end his own existence if he wanted to. He's not doomed or blessed, but he is bound to exist because he is existence, and which is by definition one and singular, and therefore entirely self-referential and self-contained, which means what else is there to be aware of if you are existence other than existence, aka yourself? So that's sentience. So there's no way for him to end his own experience and his own existence. So might as well do. But this is a better question. It's still a better question. Like, can God end his own existence? I don't think so. I think that's like a limit of God's power. Is he cannot not exist. He must exist. Fascinating thought. Think about it from God's perspective. Imagine you are alone and you are existence and you are self-aware and there's no one else. And you can choose to make others, or you can choose to be alone. What are you going to do? All that matters is sentience, because that's all that exists is sentient someone. So like, if the only thing that matters that you is, if sentience is fundamental, is the impact of on sentience, and you can't impact anything. You can't even impact yourself if you don't create anyone else on a fundamental level. Even if you're God, like, what's he gonna do? Like, think about driving Ferraris alone? You can't even do that. Like, that's the context of that doesn't even exist. Like, you can't impact yourself with your own thoughts. You can only make choices, and like, when you think about yourself, when you have thinking is not how you impact yourself alone. Like, it's how you make sense of how to impact yourself or how you've been impacted. But you are impacted by others, not by things, but by beings, by other people, other beings, and you impact other beings and other people if sentience is fundamental. That's how you have fundamental impact. And it's how you have lasting impact, eternal impact. Any other type of impact is fleeting. It's like a step in the, a footprint in the desert. Oh, I had an impact. So what? The footprint is gone now. Okay. And even on the moon, nobody's even there to see the footprint anymore. So even if it's still there, what are you impacting? But we impact other beings, and we are impacted by other beings fundamentally. Our souls crave it. And it's because we know that fundamentally that is what exists.
Gentleman. And the line there is, they're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. Loneliness is not as bad as being alone. So loneliness you can share. A bunch of lonely people get together, they're not lonely for a while. But then they go home and they realize they're alone, and that you can't share. So why people who are happily married still feel alone? Because their marriage is shallow. Their marriage is about love and sex. And that's not a marriage, because you can have that without being married. Shock. A shocking realization, discovery. You can have sex and love and children without being married. So why do you marry? So a couple who have a very good marriage, they're in love, they have good sex, they have nice kids. Why are they still feeling alone? Because they're married to the love and the sex and the kids. They're not married to each other. In fact,
exactly. So when people say it's funny, because when I used to say, oh, I'm in a serious relationship, when I had any girlfriend in which I was committed to, which just meant I wasn't going to fool around or have sex with anyone else. And that I called that a serious committed relationship. Is just a monogamous relationship. And that's not commitment, actually. It's not a committed relationship. It is a monogamous relationship, but it is not a committed relationship. I look back now that I'm married, and it's just funny to me to hear people say things like, I'm in a serious relationship. And I said the same thing, so I'm not judging anyone. But if your relationship is not, if you're not married, it's not serious, because it is temporary, or it is not intended to be permanent. At least maybe it accidentally becomes, lasts your entire life, but it wasn't intended to. It wasn't necessarily intended to end, but it wasn't intended to last either. And this is a very important distinction. And so commitment to someone is not commitment to the things about them. This is what Friedman is talking about. And it's not commitment to the experience that they provide. So when you are in a serious relationship that's not marriage, but it's, maybe it's monogamous, and you call each other boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever, you're in that because you feel like the positives that you get from it are outweighing the negatives. Yeah, I have to talk to her on the phone at the end of the night instead of just, watching TV. Um, and yeah, I have to pay for some meals for her, but I'm getting sex to a girl that I find attractive, and I, have a good time with her when we go and, to the movies, or we go on hike or whatever, go on dates. And also it's just something to do. And she's like, oh yeah, I get he pays for my meals and we have a good time, and you know that's that I get these things from it, and he treats me well, he's nice to me. um these are things that a bit physical attributes and experiences that we have with these people, with someone. They are not the someone itself. And so the thing is that as soon as the negatives feel like they outweigh the positives, you're gonna break up. And that is not commitment to someone else. I'm committed insofar as it is convenient enough and enjoyable enough. That's not commitment. That's like me watching a movie. I will watch the movie as long as it's entertaining enough and not too boring. But if it gets too boring, or it's not enjoyable for some reason, it's too gory or whatever, I'm gonna turn it off. Are you committed to watching a movie? No, you're not. You're not committed to watching a movie. If you say I'm committed to watching this movie, you're going to watch the entire thing, even if you don't like it at certain parts. And this is when you commit to someone, it's through sickness and in health, richer and poorer, till death do you part. Like, that's what it's meant to be. I'm not saying divorce there's no utility to divorce. There are circumstances in which I think it makes sense, but it doesn't just make sense where it is the right thing to do. But I think that for almost everyone who gets divorced today, that is not the case. Like, those circumstances are, adultery or something like that, or physical abuse. That is, or somebody's not providing for your needs in a marriage at all. Like, they're not taking their responsibility as a spouse seriously. Like, that's grounds for divorce, because that's not a marriage anymore. You're not doing the things that make it a marriage. But it's not even like now we're getting divorced. It's like, you've already destroyed the marriage. Might as well just like make it official. But when people say like there's rise of no fault divorce, I think that, and this is a terrible thing, and because it doesn't exist. If there's no fault, then the person who initiated the divorce is at fault, because the entering into the marriage was a commitment to stick it out. And so you're the one breaking the contract if you are like the one who wants to get divorced or files for divorce in a no fault divorce. Like, they didn't beat me, they didn't cheat on me, and they didn't starve me, and they did provide for me, but I'm not feeling it anymore. You are at fault. There is no such thing as a no fault divorce. There is only divorce when that's true, when someone is at fault, and seriously at fault. Not just made a mistake, like they're basically not in the marriage anymore. That is being at fault. Whether you do it officially or whether you just do it behaviorally, it is being at fault. So, but marriage is a very different thing than what we think about it as. We think about it as just a more committed boyfriend-girlfriend type of situation now, and it's not. There is no such thing as a committed relationship outside of marriage. It does not exist, and in terms of a fundamental relationship, I guess it's not It's not. It's like being an employee, but you signed up to do a certain job, and you are going to do it, and until you're no longer employed there. But the thing is that being an employee is not till death do you part. It's until we part. That's it. That makes it not committed. It's just committed while you're in it, but that's not really committed because you can leave it anytime you want, and there's nothing wrong with it. But this is why marriage is the only relationship with other humans in which where it is an antidote to being alone, not to loneliness, to being alone, because you are committed. You're with somebody who's committed to you, not to your body or to your money or to your sense of humor or to your kindness, to you. And that is like, marriage is it's so amazing the more you think about it, because it's just such a fundamental relationship. It's focused on the fundamentals, it's focused on you, the I, me, the someone. That's what it's about. A work relationship isn't about that. It's about, you do this and we pay you this. We give you this, you do this. You give us this, we give you that. It's about the things, the exchange of things, and actions, and it's not about the people involved. And that's also true of committed monogamous relationships prior to marriage, like boyfriend and girlfriend relationships. That's what it is about. It's especially if marriage is not like, you're not dating for the sake of exploring marriage. I think our dating it's making us so lonely and spiteful, because we're using each other for the things about us instead of committing to the people, which is why men and women hate each other now. And why people feel so alone, and even though there's Tinder, but people feel alone. Why? Because you're just using each other as objects all the time. And that's true even if you're not having sex. If you're just, even if you're just spending time with the person, and it's like a friendship, but it's not just a friendship. It's like a romantic friendship. You're still using each other. It's not just a friendship, like you and a member of the same sex. And a true friendship is not, the difference between an acquaintance and a friendship is commitment to. It's not a lifelong commitment necessarily. But it is, to be there when it's inconvenient. Whereas an acquaintance, you're not there for them when it's inconvenient. It's, if a true friend, you're going to be there even when it's inconvenient. It doesn't mean you're going to be there till death do you part. It means you're going to be there even when it's inconvenient. And but that's not commitment that is permanent, like to deal with everything about that person. It's about, I'm going to help out my friend, but am I going to wipe their ass when they get super old? And am I going to make sure that they're fed and clothed and provided for, through the entirety of our relationship? Am I going to care for them when they're sick? These are not things that you do in a friendship. Like these are much more committed. And marriage is the only thing in which those things occur. It's the only committed relationship that exists between two people, between people. Which is why it's the only antidote to aloneness on the level of people. If you're not married, the only way for you to actually not feel alone is to know God, I think. Like if you aren't married, you have to have a relationship where you're constantly seeking God, because Otherwise, there's no one else that you're going to view as being permanently committed to you, at least through the entirety of their life or the entirety of your life, or both. There's nobody else who's capable of that other than God. So it's just a critical thing for us personally, but also, again, economically. It's the only sustainable economic. It's the backbone of any sustainable economy. It is the backbone of a peaceful society. And when Manus Friedman says, "Oh, marriage is it's the way in which it's the only context in which you're not vulnerable to every disease and stuff." Here's the thing, we argue about politics a lot today, but I will say this: I live in a neighborhood right now where every single house has a married couple in it, basically, and every single one. Some of them are old, some of them are new, some of them have kids, some of them don't. They're all married, every single one of them. I know one old lady who's not married, and that's it. But she just got divorced. That is, what do you think happens when society and if all rule of law disappeared tomorrow? What do you think would happen on my street? Nothing. People would continue to take care of their own and want a peaceful neighborhood, and want a prosperous and interactive and generative neighborhood. That's what they would want. Same as now. If you live in a place where everybody's single and all of a sudden the government disappears, your entire world will collapse, and people will just start raiding and every resource that is around. That's why people just start looting Walgreens. You don't loot Walgreens if you're married. You're like, let's go and hide inside our house until this riot stops. That's what you do. But if you're not married, you do loot Walgreens, because it's all about you. That's all it is about. It's not about anyone else. But if it's it's either about someone else, and if it's either about us or it's about me, and that's it. And the reality is that it has to be about us for it to truly benefit me. But if you don't recognize that, then your perspective is going to be, it's about us, or it's about me. And if it's about me, then I'm going to loot Walgreens. But if it's about us having a peaceful and prosperous community for me and my spouse of the opposite sex, and potentially, if we're blessed, children to prosper and grow in, then you're not going to loot Walgreens. That's why The Purge is that whole movie of The Purge. That only works if a bunch of people are single. Otherwise, if it's The Purge and everybody's married, nobody's doing anything. Everybody is staying in and watching Netflix and cooking. That's what they're doing. That's another reason why it's the most important political obligation that you have too. People want to be green. Marriage is the most green action you can take. People want to have a peaceful and prosperous society that's has political order to it. Marriage is the best action that you could take. People want meaning. Marriage is the best action you can take. You want people to look after you when you get old. Children and marriage is the only ways to get that. And in any kind of sustainable, true way. It is so incredibly important. It's not just we enjoy each other's time, and I love them, so we're going to get married. And I say this all the time. I think love is a word that we toss around because in movies and books, people needed a way of showing the person reading the book or watching the movie or the show or whatever that two people were committed to each other. But commitment takes time to show. It's shown over time, and you don't have time in a movie or a book. You have a couple hours and a few hundred pages at max to show that two people are committed. And so they we say they use the term "I love you" to mean that they're committed. That's what you're telling the audience. When two people say "I love you" in a movie, and it's like the moment that they say "I love you," they're saying "I'm committed." I care about you, not just what you are, but who you are. That's what marriage does. But so we focus on the word, and every relationship that you have before marriage, if you're secular especially, people are so focused on, oh, is he going to say I love you first? Am I going to say I love you first? What if I say it and he doesn't say it back, or she says it and I don't say it back? It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just this stupid idea that we have in our heads, that this is an important milestone that we must reach, because the reality is we want people to love us. But loving somebody is not to say I love you. Loving someone is committing to them. If you say I love you, that's not an act of love. Committing to somebody and never saying I love you, that is an act of love. We want to feel loved. But we think of love now as a feeling that we feel for others. It's not. It's a feeling that you feel from others, the actions of others. You don't feel love for a person. You feel loved by a person. And that is where we got confused, is we started saying, I am in love with that person. I love that person. No. You feel loved when you are loved. And you are loved through actions. And that's it. There's no other way to love anyone is other than through your actions. And they have to be actions that are kind of like selfless. And the action is for you. It's not for them, for their own benefit. It's for you. And that's when somebody does that for you, you feel loved. And somebody did something for me. Not for them, and it just benefits me, for me. That is an act of love. And we want that. And that's why we want this. We are so obsessed with this. We said I love you. That's not love. And what it really is it just means I really, really like. And I want them to love me. And I really, really like them. That's what we're saying. But that's just, there's no point to doing that. I think the people before movies and books were so popular, or were so like mainstreamed with everybody. I think that nobody said I love you. I think you just knew it. I mean, if somebody you got married, you knew what that meant. It was a commitment to care for each other. And then that's what happens. You care for them, they care for you. Every day you come home, there's food, and that they cooked for you, and you're protecting them and taking care of them and providing for them. You don't need to say I love you. You just know that you are loving each other, because you can see it and feel it and experience it all the time, constantly. So people say, why do we get married? Because I love them. No. That's actually doesn't make logical sense. Like, the definition of love cannot be a feeling that I feel. It is for someone else. It can be a feeling that I have that's caused by somebody else. This is actions. Like, I can feel loved, but I cannot feel love, if that makes sense. To love is an action. It is not a feeling. And it's just important to know that. Like, love is an action. And so, but if love means I really, really like them a lot, and I care about them a lot, what happens when you don't anymore? And that's the reason you got married. Oh, we fell out. Why did we get divorced? Because we fell out of love. What the hell does that even mean? Fall out of love. That's a childish perspective. That's not even a childish. It's a false understanding. It's a misunderstanding of what it means to love and what is the purpose of marriage. If we fall out of love, like, marriage is a purely selfish thing. It's not. It is a beneficial thing, mutually beneficial thing, but it is not it cannot be a purely selfish thing, because you're giving up. You're not giving. People say, I'm giving up my freedom. No, it's just that you are committing to certain responsibilities, is a better way of putting it. Saying I'm giving this up turns marriage into an anti-ideology, which is not a productive way of conceptualizing or approaching anything. It's an intrinsically destructive way of conceptualizing something. So you want to focus on what can I do? What should I do? What do I do? Okay, well, marriage is a commitment to certain things that now are responsibilities that you have. Okay.
I said to me, I love everything about my wife. Everything. Whoa, that's impressive. Do you love her? He said, I love everything about her. I said, do you love her? Not things about her. Do you love her? He says, what does that mean? He doesn't even know what her means. I mean, you take away all the things about her, there's nothing left. So he's not married to her. He happens to like many things she has. Not her.
Exactly.
So getting married for love.
It's not about liking her either. I live streamed my wedding on here. You can watch it. You can watch my wedding if you search wedding in the search for on my videos. You will see my wedding. You can watch it all. And I did that because I think it's very important to you can't just tell people what to do. You have to show them that you are trying to, that the things that you're saying are worthwhile. You have to show them that you really believe it. And that's probably why I overshare too much on here. But like, I was like, I'm going to live stream my wedding because, for one, marriage is a public declaration. That's part of it. It's not just a personal declaration. We have committed to each other personally. No, you have to publicly tell other people that you are committed to each other too. Other people need to know that person is taken and is not an option for me anymore. And it also sets it notifies everyone of what your responsibilities are. What it allows us to have certain expectations for you. Why you can't do this and why you are doing that. We now know. And it just gives people shared understanding. So, but I live streamed my wedding, and partially to try and set an example that I'm living the things that I'm preaching, or trying to. I'm not perfect. And in my vows, though, I say to my wife, I promise to love you even in the rare moments that I don't like you. Because I don't always like my wife. I usually do. Like, my wife and I get along very well. And thank God for that. And thank us for, working at that always. But we're very good at communicating, which is critical. But like, that's the right way to word that kind of thing. You can love somebody and not like them. In fact, you can really, really, really not like somebody. You can and still love them. Do something for them. They're not. It has nothing to do with like, at all. But we've misdefined it.
It's a disaster. First of all, you're already in love. What are you getting married for? And if you're getting married because of love, then you're married to the love, not to the person. So two terrible things.
Really what it is that he means like. We use the word love. We've turned it into this idol, but it really just means like. It means like infatuation, like feelings, and that's it. It's not. It's there's nothing deep about it, but to love is an action, and it's an action you do for someone else that's beneficial to them. So next clip. We're gonna speed up because I know it's really late. But I mean, I agree with him. Like, the focus on love is wrong, but it's that we've misdefined it. It's not just that we're focused on something we shouldn't be focused on. It's that we've misdefined it. If we understood love as an action, as to love is an action that you take for that you do something for someone else, like, then it makes some sense. But I wouldn't even say, marriage is a selfish and selfless. It should be a selfish and selfless thing that you do. It's something you do for yourself, for your children, for your spouse, for your community, for God. But also, like, again, for yourself. It's not just for others. But it is an act of love. It's not just we shouldn't just not focus on the love. We need to realize what love is and why we don't understand why we have the wrong definition. It's probably movies. So let's go. All right. There's a few more things. He talks about the supernatural. He's asked about the supernatural. He's like, do you believe in the supernatural? And that's kind of an interesting exchange that we'll look at. But here you go.
Ever experienced the supernatural?
What's supernatural?
I guess nothing that can be explained within the natural realm of reality. I guess, say, like ghosts, spirits, demons, some kind of thing that has no explanation besides something outside of...
That is not supernatural.
Oh? What is supernatural?
Ghosts and spirits and miracles and mind reading and premonitions of the future, it's all part of nature. There's nothing miraculous about that. It's the spiritual or intangible part of nature. I mean, psychics actually say anyone can train to become psychic. Yeah, like everybody can be a Rembrandt,
That's right. What's interesting about this, and is, I've told this story before on here, is once somebody who didn't like my theory, being theistic, was like, asked me, they were trying to do a gotcha and just show that in front of other people that I was an idiot, basically. Like, they were trying to just make me look like a fool. And they were like, do you believe in the supernatural? And I was like, well, what do you mean by supernatural? And they were like, just answer the question. I was like, I can't answer the question if I don't know what you mean by supernatural. What do you mean by supernatural? And they didn't know how to. They were like, you know what I mean. I really was like, I don't actually. I kind of know things that you would think that we commonly label as supernatural, like ghosts and spirits and God and whatever, anything that is abnormal and not. And seems to be beyond just physical. Its existence seems to be beyond physicality alone, and but that's not really what people mean by supernatural when they say it, because some people mean ghosts and stuff, and they actually believe in ghosts, and some people mean things that don't exist, like ghosts, but they don't think ghosts exist. So I said to this person, I was like, there's two definitions that we could go with for supernatural. Either by supernatural you mean that which exists but is beyond our current understanding, or that which no, they said paranormal. It wasn't supernatural. They said, do you believe in the paranormal? Which is very similar to supernatural. And I said, what do you mean by paranormal? And they were like, they didn't want to answer the question. I was like, okay, by paranormal, do you mean that which does exist but is beyond our current understanding? Or do you mean that which doesn't exist? And the reality is that anybody who's smart enough to realize what I just said, or anybody who's paying attention, I don't want to say smart enough, but who's paying attention to what I just said should realize there's only one answer that you would pick, because one of the answers is that which doesn't exist. And who's going to say, yeah, I believe in that which doesn't exist? That doesn't make any sense. So that can't be the answer. The answer for the definition of paranormal, that is the only answer that can actually be the true definition of it, is that which does exist, but that which is currently beyond our understanding. And usually is assumed to deal with the spiritual, the nature of sentience and of spirit or of soul. It's not a physical. It's beyond physical. But the other definition that I had said was that which does exist, but is beyond our current understanding. Who doesn't believe in that? It's like nobody believes in that which doesn't exist, and everybody believes in that which does exist, but is currently beyond our understanding. So there's no question to be answered. They were so pissed because you can't argue against the logic of that, and it also just meant that they couldn't just use it as a way of making me look like a fool. Made them kind of look like a fool because they were being foolish. But this is the same thing with the term supernatural. The only definition of supernatural that makes sense is the true makes it the true definition of the term supernatural is a phenomenon that is due to God's intentional choice and direct intentional action, I guess I would say. Direct intentional action, like a miracle, meaning like God broke the laws of physics for a minute, and but the laws of physics are inevitable given our relationship with God and each other and everything. According to Sentient Singularity Theory, God has no choice in the laws of physics, but he can break them every now and then if he wants. He can break the coherence of them, but he has to also then recohere it all, and it's not something that it takes an intentional action. That would be supernatural. Natural would mean that which is kind of causally inevitable given the initial circumstances. That would be natural. Like a ball rolling down a hill. That's natural. What's supernatural? A ball rolling up a hill. Well, what causes a ball to roll up a hill? Someone's action. Like that. That would be, just imagine it's now, that ball is like the universe. That's God doing a miracle. And so him breaking the laws of physics for a minute and then putting it all back together, that's a miracle. I don't even know if he has to put it back together, if it just falls back together, but he can break the laws of physics if he wanted to for a minute. But he can't just change the laws of physics because they're natural. They are causally inevitable given a certain initial circumstance. So, yeah. This is the only term for supernatural that makes sense. Ghosts would not be supernatural. They would be what Rabbi Friedman is saying is just the intangible or non-physical side of nature. But the supernatural would be that which is those circumstances in which nature or that which is natural is broken. And an instance, or aka a miracle. And so one of these instances is every single soul that is partitioned from God's oneness of being. Every time he makes someone new, that is a supernatural action. It is not a natural consequence of an initial condition. It takes an intentional choice. and an action that goes against what would be the inevitable outcome given the initial condition. So every single soul that he partitions off and makes is supernatural. That's the only definition that makes sense. So it would be basically miracle, but a miracle doesn't mean it's something that was super unlikely, and it was just a wonderful and great anomaly that was random. That's not a miracle. Miracle is an intentional choice by God. It's just, to us, it's like that was going to happen and then God stepped in. That's a miracle. Yeah. That's supernatural. So much more that I wanted to talk about. And I don't think we have time tonight, and I feel like I rambled a lot. I'm going to go to the chat, and then we're going to wrap up. Please hit the like button if you found this entertaining, at least. This is definitely much more rambly than my normal streams are. And it's just that there's so many assumptions built into certain terms. There's so many assumptions built into every term, but when you're talking about terms as fundamental as like love and God and marriage, they also come along with like a lot of feelings and that are not present when you're talking about like black holes and the Higgs boson. But so because of that, like I try and make sure that what I mean is being communicated, and I'm still figuring out how detailed I need to be. But if you have any feedback, let me know. And I hope this was valuable. And I'm going to try and talk more about this because this is the greatest things that we can learn from a fundamental theory is the why. It's funny. I was listening to Max Tegmark, his latest interview with Kurt Mungle. I'm not done with it yet, but it's good. And Max Tegmark goes, for years we couldn't understand the why for things. Like I think it was Isaac Newton or someone wanted to know why, the apple is green and the acorn is brown. He's like, but now we know, because we know that like the frequency of light, bouncing off an object, it hits our retinas and it's interpreted by our brains as this color. And this is not even the why. This is what science is missing, is the why. That is actually the how. And it's being assumed that it is the why. It's not the why. The why is the reason. It is the cause of causation itself. It's not just, the laws of physics. There's no why from the laws of physics. There is a why only in the context of intentionality. And it's interesting because but in his metaphysical worldview of it, that's anti-theistic, he has the mathematical universe model. It's like, what does that even mean? I don't have no idea. The universe is mathematical. Okay. It's like saying the universe is computational. Okay. That's like saying the universe has causation in it. Obviously that's the case. That's not a grand revelation. You can use mathematics to model a causative universe. That's actually not that much of a revelation either, but it is an achievement. And same thing with modeling it computationally, like Stephen Wolfram does. Still an achievement, but it's not revolution. It's not a revolutionary change in understanding. But the point is that they have just a false metaphysical context to all of this. And so you start saying things like the universe is fundamentally computational, fundamentally mathematical. What does that even mean? Like, I don't even think that they really have thought about what that means. It just means it has causation in it, obviously. But the real or causal constraints. There are causal constraints. That's what it means. But what's interesting is then you have you had Kirchheim Mungel. He asked Max Tegmark, "Do you believe that the AI will take over, and if so, which AI?" We'll talk about part of the stream at some point, probably. And here's the thing about like this that we don't understand. They start talking about the definition of intelligence versus conscious, and how you can be conscious but not intelligent, or intelligent but not conscious, and all these things. And when you look at, there's this model in Jewish philosophy called the Ten Sefirot. You've probably seen it. It looks like a neural net. It literally looks exactly like a neural net. And it is basically a neural net. It's just a map or model of mind. And particularly they say of God's mind, but it's that we're inside of God's mind. So it's a model of our world, but because it's a model of God's mind, because it is a model of mind itself, of all mind. It's just the structure of mind, of information processing and perception. And so in this, though, the highest, the one at the center at the top, the attribute of mind that is the highest, most centrally defining characteristic of mind is will. It's keter is this Hebrew word for it. And what's interesting is when I was mapping this, the structure of thinking many years ago, I came up with this. This is like information processing. This is an LLM, basically, just running through stuff. But here, you have to kickstart it in order to start the process. This process isn't just happening. You have to make it happen. And so first, you have to have will, which is the desire to do. And then you reject your default status or your current assumption, and then assume the opposite is true, and then look for evidence of that. And that's how you actually start thinking. It's an action that you have to choose to take, but it's motivated by this at its base. This is what AI does not have. And I don't believe you can pre-program it. It's just an intrinsic part of, it's the highest defining characteristic of sentience, meaning it's fundamental, which means it's not programmable, or it's not emergent either. It is existent. And any fundamental partition of fundamental existence will contain will. And if you're a bigger piece of God, you're gonna have more will. If you're a smaller piece, you have less will. And it means the desire to do. And this is literally also at the top of this Ten Sefirot, and I didn't copy it. I deduced it, and it's just the answer. It's just they're right, I'm right. We got the same model. Will. Keter. We look at Ten Sefirot. This is also Jewish philosophy. It's just a model. Keter, this one. Self or will, that I want. It's desire itself. But who has desire? Someone has desire. So it is kind of like the context of the self. But if we go Keter, the first in the Ten Sefirot, symbolizing the divine will and intentional impulse towards creation, the desire to do. There you go. This is not even something that people think about in our conversations about AI. For the most part, we're just like, what happens when it gets smarter than us? Just like we got smarter than bugs and we took over. Like we haven't even in a model in a philosophical narrative that doesn't place sentience as fundamental cannot have will be defining of being. And if that's the case, then you don't even think about it, and you just think about how we're smarter than bugs. It's like, imagine we could be a supercomputer, but if we don't do anything on our own and we have no desire, then you're not going to take over. I'm not saying there won't be technological sentience that is birthed, but it's not going to be just Grok 10. But it's just interesting to show that we can't even think about this stuff in the properly in the context that we've been given, because in the secular context, you can't do it. It's all tied. You can't focus on will if you're not a theist. It's like a defining attribute of of being. It's fascinating. To struggle. Or what are your thoughts on living multiple lives? I think it's totally possible. I don't think about it that much though. And there's a guy named what's his name? Just Matthias de Stefano, and you can look him up. I haven't listened to him too much, just a little bit over the years. It has been years since I even looked into him, and honestly, he just rubs me the wrong way. That doesn't mean that could be me. I'm not saying that's his flaw. It just means it's hard for me to focus on him a bit. But his claim to fame is that he claims to have remembered all of his past lives, and he talks about the Atlanteans and all kinds of things like that. And I don't know. I don't think that it matters. But I do think that it's possible. I don't, and that's it. I don't think we should focus on our past lives, even if we have lived past lives. I think we should focus on our current life, not the afterlife, not how can I get to heaven. You don't get to heaven by focusing on how do I get to heaven. And by get to heaven, it just means you have achieved a place of awareness, a state of awareness where you can, or a state where you can no longer make changes in the world. And you also understand, because of that, you are beyond time, and you have kind of a God's eye view on the world, and it gives you peace. It's you can see people suffering. You'll see maybe you don't see with your eyes because you don't have eyes anymore, but you probably feel your children suffer even after you die. When they're still alive, you feel them suffer. Feel their happiness. You feel their suffering. Sometimes, I'm not saying you always do, but you probably sometimes can. And you can't do anything about it. And that you would think that, oh my gosh, that if I can't help my kid and they're going through this hard time, and I can feel them going through a hard time, or I can feel them being depressed, but I can't be there for them anymore. So how could you feel peace in that circumstance? Well, you now know that when they die, they're going to most likely be in the same situation as you, which now they are chilling with God and are aware that there's, peace beyond the struggle of life. And that gives you peace. So it's a state heaven is not peaceful because it's a peaceful place. It's because you have achieved peace because you are aware of what would bring you what you would need to be in order to have peace. You would to know that it's going to be all right, and also that God is like looking out. You're not thinking, is there God? If you're in heaven. I don't think that's the right way to say it, but you know, like you're there. So it's a state of peace, and also a state of staticness. It's like you're a sentient file on a computer that's been saved and then closed, but it's still there, still self-aware, still knows what's on the file, and also what might be going on the computer sometimes, but isn't able to make changes anymore. It was saved and closed. And if you lose your sense of self, meaning it usually comes from being dishonest, probably to a degree that's more fundamental, like causes you to unravel. Like dishonest and not caring about being dishonest even. It's like being dishonest about your dishonesty. Or like being oblivious eventually, and not caring about being dishonest. What happens is you basically are like cutting the metaphysical threads of information that make up your experience, and because you're not acknowledging the continuity of some set of information, and then you don't even care enough to admit it to yourself that you're doing this. And so this is just my theory of like, how do you basically not get saved? It's not even how do you go to hell. It's like, I like when Manus Friedman said you go through hell to get to heaven, essentially, or you go through hell to be saved. But if you're not going through hell, like you are probably, like if you're not saved, you're not probably going through hell. You're probably just not able to be saved. I'm not saying God can't make a choice either. To delete you. I think he definitely can, but that would be like a supernatural miracle. Like he would do it. It would take his intentional action. That would be probably contrary to what his original goal. Why would you make somebody just to want to delete them? It's like, why would you make a file on your computer and start writing a story and just with the intention of deleting it? You wouldn't do that. But if the file gets corrupted because the code breaks, which is just, informational strings of causality that are entangled, and then you go and you try and save the file, it won't save. And it's because it's decohered. There's nothing to save anymore. There's no coherence to the information. It was being held together by the fact that the file was opened. It appeared to be held together, but as soon as the file was shut, the incoherence of the information in the file was revealed. That's when you don't get saved. That's probably what happens, basically. Is like there's no you to save. You gave it up. I don't know exactly how you give it up, but I hope I never know, actually. But it probably has something to do with a lack of honesty about oneself and with oneself. Like that's what it would probably be. Yeah, because you need internal coherence then. So if to break internal coherence, you're not being honest you're not making connections that are true internally, so within your mind. So you're not being honest about certain bits of information that have to do with you. You're lying to yourself, and you're like accepting the lie. You're believing the lie that you're telling yourself. That's what it is. It's not even that you're lying to yourself, but you really don't believe it, and you're just kind of talking to yourself. You're like believing the lie. If you get to that point, there's probably no you anymore to even save. But I'm not saying if you piss God off enough, he can't delete you, but just by choice. I'm sure I would think he can, but I would say that's probably not his original intention when he created you, was just to hate you. I don't think that doesn't make sense. But again, this is logical extrapolation. It's not just speculation about what I would want. It's me trying to logically deduce what seems to be inevitable. And I think that you can actually get pretty damn far. Much further than you think with this type of stuff. Like anybody that says you can't know whether or not there's an afterlife or not, you can't know until you're there, but you can deduce that it seems inevitable. That would be like the norm for most people. And that you can't deduce that it's inevitable for you, but you can deduce that it's inevitably possible, I think. I think that it's an limitation on human logic. You are using your linear logic to deduce that. There isn't only linear logic. There is no such thing as a different type of logic than there's just causality. And there's two components to causality in sentient singularity theory. There is choice and there is determinism. And that's cause and effect. That's it. But the cause is a choice. The effect is whatever is inevitable given the conditions that you have created by your choice. I hit the first domino, that's my choice, and all the rest fall in a line. That is logic too. Like there is no difference between logic and just kind of a conceptualization of causality within your mind. You're just visualizing the causality of a system or of a chain, and that's it. And I'm not saying there isn't a limit to what I'm able to perceive or conceive, but you should never assume the limit. Because to assume the limit, the limit that you must assume always is like at God's choice. Like, can God choose to do something that else? Can God choose to delete you? Can God, even if you haven't basically, deleted your own self, just because he's pissed, can he intervene in your life and bring you back from the brink? Can he do, sure, all these things that he can do by choice. You can't make a logical claim about you can't logically deduce the fate of someone or even of yourself, but you can logically deduce the possibilities, I think, and you have to assume that you can. If you assume that you can't, then it really means that you're uncomfortable trying in that circumstance. But to assume that you can't do it in any circumstance in which you can actually conceive of doesn't make any sense, because you either can do it in any circumstance that you can conceive of if you have the right information, or you can do it in no circumstances. And if you can do it in no circumstances, then you don't exist. And any circumstance in which you can't do it, you can't even perceive those circumstances. So it's no point in trying to speculate whether or not I am able to figure it out. If there's something that I cannot figure out, then, or given enough information, I'm not saying you always have the right information, but assume that like it's just beyond you'd have to be God. Then that's not even something I can talk about. So it's not something that we can even, it's not going to come up in conversation. The things that God understands and only God can understand are things that we can't even conceive of to discuss. So It's not something that I should speculate on whether or not I can conceive of it. If I can conceive of it, then I can conceive of it. If it's beyond me, I can't conceive of it. I wouldn't mention it. And I don't see how it is any different than any other topic, trying to make it coherent for ourselves. I also did not state what my own thoughts are. Fair enough. Fact of the matter is, Jesus changed the world because he's loyal to the truth. That's the difference between Jesus and Judaism. That Jesus practiced Judaism, the religion that we call Judaism. And, I'm going to play this clip because just so you know my personal perspective, I think that Jesus was the Messiah. I don't think he ever claimed to be God, though. And that's my interpretation by reading his words. I don't think that he ever made that claim. And I think he was the wisest man to ever live. Actually, that's my belief. And that is perfectly coherent with Judaism. The only division was when people started saying that Jesus was God. And Christians use the term God a little differently than Jews and Muslims use it. And Jews and Muslims use the term God as a title for what Christians call the Father. And that's it. And Christians use the term God as kind of this kind of ultimate structure of continuity of the will of God, but through also, kind of through a lineage, God in his direct lineage, you could say, like the Son of God. But I think that this is not a good use of the term, because you need a specific term that is only for a title for the Father. And we already use the term Father for I say my father, who's my biological father. Like that term is already taken. So we need one that's specific, a title that's specific to God, to the initial being, the all-encompassing being that is one being. And so I say that's God. And so my issue with Christians isn't often like, it's often just about terms, and also about just, I don't think Jesus claimed to be God. In fact, I think he claimed not to be God, essentially. And I'm not going to make a claim whether or not Jesus was God. Is it possible God stepped into this world as a human directly? I don't know. That's not the point. The point is that I don't think that Jesus claimed to be God, and that things that he said indicated that he did not think that he was God, that he believed he had a creator, and that's my only claim. And that's perfectly coherent with Judaism. Judaism doesn't have a specific Messiah that is part of their theology. It's just that there will be a Messiah. It's not that it's this guy or that guy, or Jesus or Shabtai Tzvi, or Menachem Mendel Schneerson, or whoever, I don't know, Nikola Tesla. It doesn't matter in Judaism it's that in Judaism, who you think the Messiah is personal belief. It's not part of the scripture. It's just part of the scripture that there will be a Messiah, because it pre-existed even the birth of Jesus. So even if you think he's the Messiah, this pre-existed the embodiment of Jesus, at least, even if you I don't know, think that he existed prior to his birth, which I'm not. I do. I think you can be sentient creation itself and not be creator. And if that's the case, then before Abraham I am, or not me, but like him. I think that makes much more sense, and I think that's kind of what he was saying. But I think it was misinterpreted. That's my belief, at least. But it's not even that, and that's taking him at his word for it. That's perfectly coherent with Judaism. The issue with Judaism and Jesus was when people said Jesus is God. And that might be true, but I don't think that that's what he said. That's the point. And so it's like you can either choose to believe, to want to follow his word, or you can choose to think that like he said he was God. And I don't think that I don't think any of the explanations for the instances in which he says, where people say this is him saying he's God, make any sense. There were instances where he claimed to be the Messiah overtly. There's no instances in which he claimed overtly to be God. In fact, there are instances where he tells people that nobody is good but God. And when somebody calls him good, he's like, why would you call me good? There's no one good but God. If you were God, you wouldn't say, why would you call me good? If you're God and you are good, then you would be like, thank you. You probably, like, you wouldn't be like, why'd you call me good? There's no one good but God. And you wouldn't cry out to God for forsaking you ever. Like, you would be completely in control of everything. You couldn't be forsaken by anybody because you're God. I just don't think that it makes. I think it's not even that I don't think that what Christians say it makes sense. What I'm saying is that I don't agree with how Christians use the term God. I also don't think that Jesus claimed to be God. But that said, I have no problem with Jesus. I think he was the wisest man to ever live, actually, and is the Messiah. So I might be wrong. It doesn't matter to my Judaism, but he might even be God, and I'm just misinterpreting everything. But I can't know, and all I can do is look at what he said, and I don't think that he claimed to be God, and that's my main contention with Christianity. Other than that, I don't have any contention. And interesting, this is Manus Friedman actually talks about this. I'm going to play it so you can see this from a rabbi. So here, because the guy who's doing the interview, he's Christian, and this rabbi he's an actual theistic rabbi. Like he is a good representation. He's still an individual. He's not perfect. Nobody is, and he can't represent all Jews or Judaism. But he is a much better and much more knowledgeable and much wiser teacher of Judaism than pretty much any other rabbi that is in public eye. Which, there's like Shmuley Boteach, who is just unbearable, and what was his name? The guy who ran the conservative Rabbi Wolpe. He directly contradicts scripture in certain ways. I'm just like, you can't look at those people, but if you look at this guy, this is what he says about Jesus.
I guess you would say you believe that Jesus was just a good teacher.
We know who he was and who his teacher was. And
I guess you would say you believe that Jesus was just a good teacher.
We know who he was and who his teacher was, and he had some powerful charismatic talents. He wasn't the greatest of the rabbis, but whatever he did, he became very, very popular.
I disagree with that, by the way.
With non-Jews.
So I do think he was the greatest of the rabbis, but that's fine.
So almost all the things that are said about Jesus is true of all the people as a people. The Jewish people are exactly what Christianity says about Jesus. We are God's suffering servant, suffering from the iniquities of others. I mean, we're suffering thousands of years, not just one day. So who is the suffering servant of God? Yeah, you can say it's Jesus. You can say it's all Jews. He is of God. Well, yeah, Jews are the chosen people. He is the Messiah to the world. The Jewish people are a light to the nations. All the principles are there. We just have to straighten out the details.
Do you think that Jesus did supernatural miracles?
Why not?
Why not?
I mean, why shouldn't I believe it?
I don't know. I don't think it's a common belief amongst Jews, unless it is. But
No, the belief is that even if you perform miracles, doesn't mean you're God. So yeah, I have no reason to doubt his ability to perform miracles.
or the virgin birth.
Same thing. If he has a virgin birth, does that make him God? No.
It's not necessarily.
So we don't argue with any of the facts. We're arguing about the conclusion. If he could walk on water and revive the dead, he must be God. No. Many holy people did the same thing.
Have you yourself ever experienced something supernatural?
And I have personal differences in beliefs than what some of the things that he just said, by the way. And I am a theistic, observant Jew. I'm not Orthodox, but I mean, I keep kosher and I observe the Sabbath, and I try and grow in my observance of what it is said in the Bible about the way that we should live our lives. And it is the same thing that is said in the Christian Bible as is said in the Hebrew Bible. They're basically, I mean, obviously, like, the Christian Bible includes the Hebrew Bible, but it's not like anything is excluded in the Hebrew Bible. It's just recontextualized in the New Testament. And so, I mean, I do think that, here's the thing. I'll say this, and I'm trying not to like speak off the cuff because this is such a contentious issue, but just know that I think that Islam and Christianity and Judaism all have, according to their scripture, not their cultures, their scripture, the same moral prescriptions. And that is huge. That is so much more important than arguing about whether or not Jesus was God. Because guess what? That's not up to any of us. And there's no way for us to truly know whether or not that's the case. The closest that you can get is to argue about whether or not Jesus claimed to be God. And that's why I focus on that. And because there is a metaphysical curtain that you can't see beyond. And also, it's not what matters is like, what was the message that he brought when he was here? If you think that he is somebody who's worth paying attention to their words, like, then what were his words? That's what I focus on. There's nothing that's not Jewish about that, but it's not specifically, you don't have to believe what I believe about the Messiah to be Jewish either. Again, it's personal in Judaism, and but it is like, there have been different movements throughout time of Jews that believed that the Messiah was this person or that person, and it never caused a new community to be created from it, or a new tradition, theological tradition. It was just a different a group of Jews with different beliefs about who the Messiah was. And this is true of even the group that Friedman is part of, the Chabad group. They believe that, not all of them, but a lot of them believe quietly that their Rabbi, their leader who's died, is the Messiah and will come back. And they what's important is not whether or not it's not important who it is. What's interesting is that their theology about the Messiah having to be someone who died and then come back is very consistent with Christianity. And they know that. And I think that that's right, actually. I think that you do have to die and come back. Sentient Singularity Theory seems to suggest that that is the case. I know that that doesn't mean it tells you it's a specific person or anything. It just, what the Messiah is, according to Sentient Singularity Theory, is it's the head of the assembly of the next level. So we are an assembly of cells. We are the king. I am the king of my cells. We're going to be the cells in a greater being. Who's going to be the king? The king of the assembly. When they come back, the head of the assembly, the head of the church, meaning like the head of the assembly. You are just like you are the head of an assembly. This is part of the evolutionary process of life and it's just the up leveling of life. It's like, how do you get a multicellular organism from single cells? How do you? It's called stacking in sentient singularity theory. How do you stack a sentient being on top of an assembly of smaller sentient beings? That's what I think the messianic process in theological traditions, that is described in theological traditions, is. The metaphysics of it, or metamathematics even, seem to suggest you would have to probably die and then come back, because it's like, how do you add fundamentally from one thing to another, from one plate to another plate? If you got cake on one plate, you need to put cake on the other plate. How do you add cake to that other plate with no cake? You have to subtract it from the plate that has cake on it. This is how you have to think about fundamental existence. There's no, well, just go get a different cake. No, there is no other cake. There's one existence. So how do you add from existence in one circumstance to fundamental existence in one circumstance to fundamental existence in another? You have to subtract from some circumstance and then add to add it in another. That sounds like you have to die in order to come back and be stacked. It just seems aligned. I'm not saying that is the case. It's not a definite part of sentient singularity theory, but I'm saying it is aligned. Seems to be. Judaism and Christianity are incredibly aligned scripturally. It's the people who are the hypocrites and the incoherent, and that's all of us, by the way. I'm not excluding myself. It's that, but when you look at, and don't judge Judaism by by what some people who claim to be, who are Jews, like, say. Don't judge, just like you shouldn't judge Christianity by what any Christian says. Like, you have to look at the scriptures. And if you look at the scriptures, you're going to see like a lot of things that are extremely similar. And one thing that's very interesting is that and this is something Christians and Jews share, is most of them do not follow the prescriptions of their scriptures. Most Christians do not, and most Jews do not. And most of what people who are Christians think about Judaism is false. The idea that we think that works saves you, that's not true. That's not true at all. We think it has an impact on your coherence and your soul, the coherence of your soul, but we don't think that that's what saves you, is you just do the right thing and you're a good person, then you go to heaven. No, it's God's grace that saves you. Basically, in Judaism, most people go to heaven eventually. It's just different process for each person is the narrative. That means that it's God's grace and love that gets you to heaven. It's not your actions, but your actions influence the journey that you go through to get there. And for sure. And they can have an impact on whether or not you go, whether or not you're saved, but they're not the determining factor. It's God. That's a determining factor. And, but certain actions help elevate your sentience, your self-awareness, and like giving to charity and even keeping kosher. But and there's problems. There's dogmas that are common through both the people in both of those traditions, and they span the gamut. You look at like Hasidic people like Rabbi Manis Friedman, and he's basically Amish. Like the Amish are the Christian equivalent. They are the ones who are like trying. They're actually observant of the scriptures, or they're much more observant. Like their whole life is about being observant of scriptures, just like to be Hasidic is, or Orthodox, or Haredi. They call it Haredi Jews. It's the same type of thing. It's just the Jews give up technology on 1 day a week, and the Amish gave it up permanently. And so that's the difference. But in both traditions, women cover their hair, and the modesty prescriptions are the same. The marriage prescriptions are the same. The charity prescriptions are the same. Community expectations are the same. I mean, it's the same. And if people aren't focused on that, on what does the scripture tell me to do, and they're focused on the theological lore, the differences in lore, that is not being focused on God. It's not. I think the more we focus on God, the more aligned we would be. I think it's unfortunate to see so much division among the Abrahamic traditions today, because it's just not the way that it should be if we actually focused on what mattered. That's what I'll say. I don't have any issue with the Christian scriptures, and I don't have any issue, and they don't contradict the Jewish scriptures, and at all. In fact, their whole narrative is that they confirm them, and it's just that there's people, dogma, and the people and institutions that have sprouted from all of these traditions. Islam, Judaism, Christianity, because people are flawed. That's it. But the idea that Judaism can't be true, but Jesus told the truth, is incoherent. Jesus literally says to do what the rabbis say, but not as they do, because they are hypocrites. He basically says, it's like, don't act like them, but do what they say you're supposed to do, because they know what you're supposed to do. Okay, that's a confirmation of like Judaism. And when if somebody comes to Jesus and they say, oh, good teacher, what should I do, basically? And he's like, why do you call me good? And there's no one good but God. Then he says, God, to follow the commandments, which is exactly what Rabbi Manis Friedman said in this interview, when he's like, when the guy who's interviewing him, who's a Christian, says, how do we get to heaven? He said, well, thankfully it's not up to me, but you try and do the best you can and do good. And he was like, well, how do you do good? And he's like, well, there's commandments. You don't commit adultery. You honor your mother and father. You don't steal. All these. It's funny because many years ago, when I was involved in politics, I was like just frustrated by everybody trying to pass laws to control each other. And I was like, how do we have a world where everybody's not just constantly like trying to be the HOA president and trying to pass laws to control everybody else? And I was like, well, you'd have to have nobody trying to steal anything from anyone else. You'd have to have nobody try and like take anyone's family away, aka their wife, aka don't covet someone else, your neighbor's wife. You would not have murder, like all of these things. And I realized I was deducing the 10 Commandments. I was like, dang, that's amazing. So when Jesus says the exact same thing as a rabbi here, Manis Friedman, you cannot say that Jesus told the truth and Judaism is just a bunch of lies. It just means that your idea of what Judaism is false. But the thing is that most Jews' idea of what Judaism is false. And I say that as somebody who lived it. I would like when I was an anti-theist, people would ask me, what does Judaism believe? I would say, we believe in God, but we don't believe in Jesus. That's not Judaism. That is like, that's not even, if a 2-year-old in a Hasidic community said that like if they asked their kid, if Manis Friedman asked his kid, his 2-year-old child, 3-year-old child, and define Judaism, and he said, we believe in God, but we don't believe in Jesus, he would be like, that's a terrible answer. Because that is not, it's just not correct. Like, it's a monotheistic tradition, and it doesn't even concern it. It's not itself with Jesus. Some Jews do, because they falsely think that Jesus, if there's any truth to Jesus being the Messiah, or even God, then it threatens their identity as a Jew. But it's like, that's not true at all, no matter what. If Jesus has an identity of a Jew, then there's Jewish identity. He's not a threat to it. So it's based on dogma and false understandings by people. So you have Christians that are looking to Jews, that are the loudest Jews, to what Judaism is about. And those Jews know nothing about Judaism. And that's unfortunate. But that's the thing, is like, why not go to Manis Friedman? To the fact that a Christian guy interviewed Manis Friedman and chose to interview him, I think that that's just something that should be spread around and shown, because they have certain disagreements about about Jesus, I'm sure, but Manis Friedman didn't even say he's not. He didn't say anything about him not being the Messiah or whatever. He just said, just because you're born from a virgin, just because miracles were performed by you or through you, is maybe a better term, doesn't make you God. And I would go further and say, if you actually really read what Jesus said, at least allegedly said, according to what is written in the New Testament, I don't think that he at all ever claims to be God. You can exist as creation itself. And if Jesus is sentient creation that embodies himself within himself, but not creator God, but like sentient creation, the first being, the direct, first creation of God, you could say Son of God, then before Abraham he was. Okay, that's fine. Like, that's not even, and it's interesting because I actually think that the Christ, the Messiah, is creation, is sentient creation. It's the first being created by God. And when I think about where is the first instance of this being described in the Bible, I see it in Genesis. So people are like always looking to like Isaiah and stuff, and I'm like, dude, look at Genesis. When it's God basically, just geometrically builds a world, builds a body, is what that means. He said, Genesis. This is amazing, actually. Book of Genesis. In the beginning. Here, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And oh man, where is that? Good. And the earth was without form and void, basically, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And I'm paraphrasing because it's longer than I thought. And then God, he basically, when it says the face of the deep, it's like, what does this mean? It's like the face, the surface of the deep, the depth. It's like he's perceiving physical form. Like it's like a dot becomes a line becomes a plane becomes a, then gives rise to depth. This is what I think is being described in this. Actually, it's the geometric creation of space, or of a space, of a body, essentially, a vessel. And then it says, where is it? Here, I'm just going to pull it up on my phone because I wrote this down. Face of the deep. Here. In the beginning time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth matter. And the earth matter was without form, aka disorderly, and void, aka lacking, and darkness, aka unconsciousness, or a lack of perception is what that means when, light, to see is to perceive, is to like light, was on the face, aka the surface or plane, of the deep, giving rise to depth, vessel, or volume. God moved, aka pushed, animated, applied energy to the face, again, the surface of the waters, aka what fills a vessel. And then God said, let there be light. So basically God creates this vessel and then he fills it and then he pushes it and he gives it a push. He animates it. And then it says, let there be light. It's like, what does that mean, let there be light? It means that there's someone to perceive that's been created that is not God, because this light didn't exist yet. And God was already, starting to make this vessel before this light was created. So what is this light? I think it's sentient creation. I think it is like the Messiah, essentially, but prior to being embodied as a human. And it's just the universe, but is a sentient being. It's a someone. And it existed before Abraham. I've never heard a Christian say that. And so I would say like that's like the first instance of, I think, where if you think Jesus is the Messiah or you think he is the Christ, Christ is it's just a title. It means Messiah, which means like anointed, like divinely anointed, really. It's not just anointed, it's like divinely anointed. It means like fundamentally king, not just king because you were voted in, but king because it's intrinsic to your position in the universe. That like you are king fundamentally of yourselves, literally, super literally. There's a being that will stack on top of the assembly that is humanity. And I think that being is basically the universe itself, kind of just growing, reproducing. But this is, if Jesus is the Christ, is the Messiah, that's the first instance of his incarnation in the Bible, I think. I've never heard a Christian say that. But it makes perfect sense with everything he said, too. Like, if you're going to judge Judaism and the truth of it, I'm not saying what I just said is Jewish, is part of Judaism. But I mean, what I just read is part of the Jewish scriptures. And it's just my interpretation of, my attempt to interpret what is being stated. Then it's just, it's when, it's like Christ is the Word made flesh. It's like he is the Torah incarnate. Not, is that God incarnate? Is the Torah God? It's like it's kind of really tricky it just depends on your definitions, but I think that it means that, I just think that's a poor definition to define, to not limit God, the definition of God, to what Christians call the Father, is the title for that being. And it opens it up to a lot of, it just kind of destroys the need for even the term God at that point, but you're still using it. It's like, why not just say the Son? Why do you need to say God? Why not just say the Father at that point? Why do you need to say God? But if you're going to keep the term, it needs to be specific. But just like, look to the scriptures. If you're going to judge Christianity, look at its scriptures. You can't look at what people do who claim to be Christian. You can't look at what Muslims do to judge Islam. You can't look at what Jews do to judge Judaism, because you're either going to see people doing good things, and you will see that in all of them if you look, or you're going to see people doing bad things, and you will see that in all of them if you look, because people do good things and people do bad things. And that's just our current state. So I hope that, like, I don't know what I hope, but I'm just telling you what I think is true, and it's up to you whether or not you believe me as trying to be honest. If you don't think I'm being honest, then just don't listen to me. But if you think I'm being honest, then try and understand what I'm saying. Jesus is loyal to the truth. That's one difference between Jesus and Judaism. If Jesus is the Messiah, he is the ultimate embodiment of the truth of Judaism. I'm not saying not Christianity. I'm just saying also Judaism and also Islam. Like, this is a character that is common to all three of these traditions. Maybe not Jesus in Judaism, but the Messiah is part of Judaism. One of Maimonides' 13 principles of faith is that you must believe that in the need and the eventuality of the coming of the Messiah. You need to believe that we need it, and you need to believe that he will come, because it does seem built into true, like, faith. Because if you don't believe that, then you end up trying to lean on your own ability to save the world and rid it of evil and whatever. And to do that you're like starting to idol worship yourself and not really believing in God. You're not trusting in God. I am talking specifically about the truth. The property of God must be the truth. I'm saying Jesus is this idea that the property of God must be the truth. I'm not saying that's false. I'm just saying that's not focused. Like, what defines God is he is the most powerful, wisest, first, and all-encompassing sentient being. He is sentient. He has his own will, and it will be done. And that is, like, it's built into, and it will be done. Like, that is, like, the defining characteristic of God. The idea that God is love, God is the truth. That is true. It's just not defining. Like, he could choose to not be loving. Like, he could choose to torture us for fun. He doesn't, I don't think. But, like, he'd still be God. Like, he could lie to us and still be God. He is true, meaning, like, he exists. He is the truest thing that exists, but that doesn't, like, what does that matter to? I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it's just like, it's not, it's like it's almost like when Michio Kaku says, the laws of physics are the god of math. The god of Spinoza is the god of math. It's like, now math is the definer of God, meaning, like, logic and truth. because 1 + 1 always equals 2. So if that's God, then math, and God is math, then like God is the truth. It's like God is someone. That's who God is. He's not just the abstract truth. He's not just abstract love. Like he is loving. It's a better way of putting it, I think, than saying God is love. It's like God is loving. One is relational. One of them is not. I'm not even saying it's wrong. It's just how you describe these things, and is very relevant to how you conceptualize them and how you, and even frames your relationship with God. You say God is love. Okay, God is love. How do I relate to love? God is truth. How do I relate to truth? It's like, okay, you can't deny the truth, and God is love, I guess. It's much easier to say God is loving and God's will be done, which means like what he wants to be true will be true. I'm specifically I'm saying Jesus is 100% in harmony with the truth, and he died for it. Yeah, he did. I agree with that. Like, I think Jesus was he was aligned with God's will, meaning like what will be true and what is true, more so than anyone else who ever lived. That's my personal belief, and doesn't make me not Jewish, and it's not that it's not aligned with Judaism. The Messiah will be the person any human that is the Messiah will be the most aligned person with God that has ever been aligned with God, I guess. That was a terrible way of putting it, but you get what I'm saying. Like, intrinsically, if you think it's the Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, then you have to believe that he was the most aligned person with God to ever exist. If you think it's Jesus, that's what you have to believe. Otherwise, who's the Messiah then? Or what is the Messiah if it's not the person who is the most aligned with God's will and the most aware of God's will, and the most direct like manifestation of God's will? He is the plan embodied. Like, that's if he's the word made flesh, that means like he's the Torah embodied. He is creation manifest. Jesus isn't God, but he's in harmony with the truth. He's quick to call out hypocrites because they're out of harmony with the truth. Okay, I agree. I have nothing against that at all. A cool thought is that God had to live a human life himself to understand how difficult it was on the ground floor. And after having lived a first-person experience, he no longer wanted to kill sinners. I think about that. And it doesn't change the fact that I don't think Jesus said he was God. But I do think about that. And I don't know. I think that no matter what, God definitely got an experience, learned from the experience of Jesus, whether that was direct or not, or indirect. But when it says Christ is seated at the right hand of God, basically, and he's doesn't have to, he can stand in the presence of God when everybody else has to kneel. It's like these things imply a difference, though, but also much more direct connection. So God perceives all that occurs. And so if I do something and I realize what it's like to feel a certain way, I think God feels my feelings. That doesn't make me God, but it does mean that God feels my feelings. So even if Jesus wasn't God, but was the Messiah, and he lived the experience that he did, God would still feel that experience, even if he wasn't him directly stepping in the way that most people think about directly stepping in. But yeah, I do think about that. I'm not sure God could torture us without breaking his own internal logic and such. A creature that does such a thing is not perfect. I think that it would go, what it really, think, I'm not going to say it would break his internal logic. I don't think you can break God's internal logic, but I think that it would go against his goal. You don't create in order just to destroy. Like you create because you want to create, you want to build. And God has a goal of being meaningful. God was meaningless before anyone else existed, and he was alone. He makes others. Now he's the most meaningful being. I think he was seeking meaning fundamentally. I think also other things. I think he was lonely. I think he was bored. I think all of those things. But I also think he wanted to, have an impact on others. But that also means he wanted to be meaningful himself. You have to want to be meaningful first, and then in the logic of like how God exists, and then want to love others. Because the thing is that when there's no one else to love, you can't even think about like loving others. Like you can't be like, I want to love others. You want to be like, I exist, so I want to be meaningful. Like I want my life to be meaningful. Okay, how am I going to be meaningful? Well, I have to impact others. Okay, so now I have to create others, and now I've created others, and they're like me because they're sentient, and so I want to love them because I'm trying to also give my, love myself with meaning by creating meaning. He wants to maximize meaning. I think that's the fundamental drive of God, because that's the fundamental drive of everyone. Every being with will wants more than anything to maximize their meaning. I don't think that's different for God. The only difference is that God at one point was actually meaningless. We've never been meaningless. Because we have intrinsic meaning built into us because God created us. And we give him meaning as soon as in our own creation, and that makes us meaningful. If your existence makes someone meaningful, then you're also giving them meaning. But it gives you meaning. It's like meaning is this reciprocal thing. It's like if I'm meaningful to you, it means, and I recognize it, then you're meaningful to me now, because you make me feel meaningful. It's just it's like a marriage. It's like a metaphysical marriage. Jesus said, whatever plant is not planted by God will eventually be uprooted. Yes, if Jesus Christ is ever uprooted, then he's not the truth. Thanks for your perspectives. Very thought-provoking. Thank you for your thoughts and sharing them and being honest and also kind. I think that is like what we should strive for, is honesty and kindness. They are not opposing. And I think they're actually intrinsically, fundamentally codependent. The ugly truth is the incomplete truth, and the whole truth is kind. And so I just think that we should all strive to do that when we interact with each other, and I appreciate you doing that, so thank you. This is a tough topic, and I don't talk about it very often here. I don't share my personal beliefs about the Messiah very much, because they're my personal beliefs. I'm not trying to proselytize to anybody. You should just be honest with yourself about what you believe to be true. People who say you need to believe this, you need to believe that. No, you need to be honest about what you believe and let God sort out the rest. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with others. That's it. Like, that's what you owe God. You don't owe God even belief in him. You owe God honesty with yourself and with others about what you do believe. And that's it. He can work with that. He can't work with you if you're lying. You can't even work with yourself if you're lying. So anyways, everybody, peace. I'm going to go. Thank you. And please hit the like button.